1986's The Transformers the Movie is quite possibly the single most important piece of Transformers media ever, introducing characters and concepts that became intrinsic parts of the franchise's lore, which still echo across every new Transformers story told today. In this video, we're going to look at the evolution of the film's script, the multiple earlier versions of the story, what was changed, and what was kept on the journey to bringing the Transformers' first big screen adventure to life. It's Transformers the Movie, The Untold Story. The story of the film begins in the summer of 1984 with writer Ron Friedman. Friedman was a script editor of sorts on the original Transformers cartoon, who rewrote the show's dialogue for consistency and flavour. And according to associate producer Flint Dille, he had a great contract that ensured he would have a writer credit on any potential movie made of the series. Thus, as production of the scripts for the cartoon's first season was wrapping up towards the end of the summer, and production on the movie was beginning, it was Friedman who wrote the first story outline for the film. Now, we don't know exactly how much of this outline was based on demands from Hasbro, and how much Friedman came up with himself, but per Friedman's own statements, it's understood that Hasbro insisted that the story feature the death of Optimus Prime, which Friedman didn't agree with, while Friedman himself argued for the inclusion of a female Autobot, RC. The outline served as a basis for the first draft script Friedman then produced, which was completed by February 1985. A mystery for years, a copy of this first script was finally found by Transformers fan and archivist Jim Sorensen, while helping Flint Dille to organize his storehouse of paperwork in 2020. Subsequently, Jim and I did a presentation about the script at UK convention TF Nation in 2022, accompanied by a series of unofficial artists' impressions of select scenes, which is what you're going to see as I take you through this early version of the story. Friedman's first draft takes place an unknown amount of time in the near future. Almost all the characters featured in the script are either brand new ones or taken from the first season of the cartoon. The only second season characters that show up are Decepticon jets Thrust, Dirge, and Ramjet. Notably, none of the Autobots' established human allies like Spike Witwicky appear. The story kicks off with an army of Decepticons, with the Constructicons front and center, laying siege to an Autobot steel mill, which is defended by the film's primary heroes: youthful Autobot Hot Rod, the elderly Tanker, a grizzled one-eyed Autobot who transforms into a Sherman tank, RC, who acts as medic to those injured in the fight, Wheeljack, and their commanding officer, Magnus, a mighty warrior who boldly races into action to take out a Decepticon cannon emplacement, blasting the mill with napalm like fire snow. As a quick side note here, the illustration you're seeing of Magnus is based on an early original concept by the movie's character designer, Floro Deary. When it was replaced with the finished Magnus design, Deary would rework this design and reuse it for Orion Pax in the cartoon episode War Dawn later in the year. Meanwhile, Optimus Prime is on the way with reinforcements and more fuel for the besieged bots at the steel mill. He and the other Autobots are riding in vehicle mode on flatbed cars towed by a freight train, crewed by their human allies, Colonel Rusty Steele, a dry-witted Indiana Jones-type Green Beret, and the gruff General Blaze. Megatron and the Decepticons appear to bar the train's way, and Starscream tears up the tracks ahead to stop it, but it transpires that using this big, obvious mode of transport was all part of a plan by Optimus to lure Megatron out, and that the train is really a gigantic Autobot named Rails, who converts from freight train to futuristic hovering bullet train and smashes Starscream out of his path. Then, when the Autobots arrive at the mill, Rails transforms again to his robot mode, a colossal fire-breathing snake, who breaks the back of the Decepticon siege, smashing, crushing, and melting the Decepticons and their siege towers. As Rios wreaks havoc, Optimus Prime and Megatron have their final face-off. When Hot Rod spots Megatron reaching for a blaster, he intervenes in an attempt to help his leader, but Megatron exploits the distraction he creates to open fire on Prime. Though gravely wounded, the Autobot leader uses the last of his strength to deliver a fatal final blow to Megatron as well. The Decepticons take Megatron and retreat, flying off back to Cybertron, while Rusty takes charge of the shocked and horrified Autobots and lays out a plan. Ratchet and one group will take the wounded Optimus back to headquarters for treatment, while another, headed up by Wheeljack, will begin construction of a fleet of spacecraft to pursue the weakened Decepticons and finish them off once and for all. Gears isn't very happy about a human giving orders to Autobots, but RC speaks up to get the Autobots to fall in line with Rusty's plan. RC volunteers herself to be part of Wheeljack's team, which introduces one of the movie's big running gags. Wheeljack's an old-fashioned misogynist who thinks a woman like RC will only get in the way, but in fact she's extremely skilled, often spotting details he's overlooked and saving his neck multiple times. Ratchet's group takes Optimus back to Autobot headquarters, which in the intervening years has expanded to encompass the entire volcano, having become a huge complex where Autobots and humans live and work together. Here we meet the Autobot Springer, described as a muscular Arnold Schwarzenegger type, human computer programmer Ellen Prentice, and her son, Daniel. Daniel looks up to Rusty, but Ellen's not a fan. She'd prefer Daniel focus on his studies. Meanwhile, Tanker consoles Hot Rod, who's consumed with guilt over the role he played in Optimus's injuries. Guilt that only deepens when, after examination, Ratchet announces that Prime's wounds are fatal. Before he dies, Optimus passes his life essence, called his Matrix, represented by a small glowing figure of Prime himself made of pure light, to Magnus, who becomes the Autobots' new leader, Ultra Magnus. Concurrently, the Decepticons return to Cybertron to enshrine the dying Megatron's life essence in an urn in their Hall of Heroes, but begin fighting about who's going to take his place as the new leader. In the course of the fight, a stray blast from Skywarp accidentally destroys the urn intended to hold Megatron's essence. Unnoticed by his brawling troops, Megatron expires, and with nothing to contain it, his spirit drifts off into space, where it will evaporate into nothingness. Before that can happen, however, Megatron's essence is seized by a ray of cold light and pulled across space to the planet Unicron, a strange slab-shaped world covered in crystalline scales and undulating trees and grass. There, Megatron converses with the voice of an unseen being that refers to itself only as the Entity, the caretaker of planet Unicron. The Entity offers Megatron a deal: enter his service and acquire him energy to feed the planet Unicron, and in return he will be reborn in a powerful new body. Megatron accepts and is recreated through the Entity's power as Galvatron, his body wreathed in the same scales that cover Unicron. Galvatron returns to Cybertron, where the Decepticons are still fighting over leadership, and retakes command. The Entity's light shines down on Cybertron, transforming and powering up all the other Decepticons into new scale-covered forms, beginning with Starscream and the Jets. The Entity orders the Decepticons to travel to Earth and acquire the energy of the planet for him, but as they depart, the Entity's light expands to cover all of Cybertron, and the Transformers' homeworld is destroyed, collapsing in on itself and being sucked away across space through the beam of light for Unicron to feed upon. The Entity laughs off Galvatron's rage and horror, and under his breath, Galvatron vows revenge. Back on Earth, in preparation for pursuing the Decepticons, the Autobots have begun construction of massive armoured shields, which they intend to ship out to Earth's major cities to serve as defence in case of an attack while they're off-planet. But when Galvatron and the Decepticons arrive, their new entity-given power allows them to cut through the shields like butter and destroy all the spacecraft Wheeljack has been building. Badly outmatched, the Autobots are forced to abandon their headquarters and scatter to the four winds. After a short time skip, the Decepticons are shown to have taken over on Earth, where hunting parties of eerie, black-clad, Gestapo-like Decepticons now carry out sweeps in search of Autobot fugitives. Rusty narrowly avoids being spotted by one of these sweep parties, and rejoins a group of Autobots hiding out in the mountains, where the news goes from bad to worse, as Wheeljack and RC report that the Decepticons have constructed a cage around Earth that is draining the planet's energy and beaming it off into space to Unicron, leaving Earth with only days to live. The camp is then discovered by the hunting party, so the Autobots keep the cons busy while the humans escape on a raft via a nearby river. Hound uses his holograms to confuse the cons with false targets, and Sideswipe and Sunstreaker clobber them with steel beams. With the humans safely away, the Autobots then escape under cover of a smokescreen created by an Autobot named Chemico. Hot Rod and Tanker are given the task of finding other scattered Autobots to form a crew who'll head into space and find and destroy the source of the Decepticons' strange new power. A little later, Hot Rod and Tanker locate Springer in the desert and watch as he uses the leaping power for which he's named to take out an entire Decepticon unit led by Starscream solo. Springer leads the pair to a nearby Autobot refinery to recruit more troops. They're attacked by Insecticons and more Decepticons on the way, but when they reach the refinery, help awaits in the form of the Dinobots, Grimlock, Sludge, and Swoop. Blur, a high-speed advanced scout described as a slow-talking Jimmy Stewart sort, and the refinery's resident brainiac, Mentlar, a large-headed Autobot scientist who turns into a radar truck. Mentlar has invented an immunodestabilizer field that cuts the Decepticons off from the entity's power, reverting them back to their normal forms and allowing the Dinobots to send them packing. Unfortunately, the Decepticons are already developing a resistance to the destabilizer field, so Mentlar and his crew agree to join the mission into space. The Autobots all regroup in an Arctic ice cave, where Wheeljack and RC have been able to salvage a single spacecraft for the mission. Rusty will be going into space with the bots and bids farewell to Daniel and Ellen. But then, the Decepticons attack, and in the chaos, Daniel and Ellen are forced to board the ship with Rusty, Magnus, Springer, Blur, and Mentlar as it blasts off. Hot Rod, Tanker, and the Dinobots fly alongside it, while Wheeljack, RC, General Blaze, and the other Autobots remain to continue the fight on Earth. The Decepticons try to close the energy cage around the Autobots to prevent their escape, but when the effort fails, the entity provides Galvatron with a spaceship so the Decepticons can pursue them. Mentlar and Ellen work together to calculate the location of the Decepticons' power source, tracking it to the Shadow Nebula, and Mentlar provides the humans with exosuits that enhance their strength. As they're getting to grips with them, the Decepticons catch up to the bots, and our heroes split up. Hot Rod's group takes refuge on a nearby geologically unstable asteroid, while Magnus's team keeps the Decepticons busy, intending to blind them with flares, then slip away and join back up with Hot Rod's team on the asteroid. Unfortunately, Galvatron has sent Laserbeak to follow Hot Rod's team, so the cons know where the Autobots are and simply follow them. The battle moves to the asteroid, during which a Decepticon bombing run flings Hot Rod's group off into space. Then, a galactic warp hurricane suddenly strikes, causing the Decepticon carrier to crash into the asteroid. Magnus can't pass up this fortuitous opportunity to escape and continue their mission, so his team are reluctantly forced to abandon Hot Rod's group and swiftly depart. When Galvatron emerges from the wreckage and detects no Autobot life signs, he believes all the bots have died in the storm, and the Decepticons return to finish matters on Earth. The last act of the film takes place across 3 different settings, each following a different group of characters: Hot Rod and Tanker's group, Magnus's team, and the Autobots on Earth. Hot Rod and Tanker's group crash land on an alien planetoid. Hot Rod and Tanker land in the ocean, where Tanker is dismembered by a robotic squid and saved by Hot Rod. Hot Rod puts the old bot back together, and they set out to search for the Dinobots. Instead, they encounter the alien Sharkticons, and when attempts to placate them with the universal greeting fail, they're taken prisoner. The creatures have also captured Sludge and Swoop, immobilizing them with stun sticks, and have begun taking bites out of Swoop. Tanker and Hot Rod are brought before the Sharkticons' masters, the Quintessons, creatures with spindly bodies, huge 5-faced heads, and mental powers. There, they meet a fellow captive, the rock robot, Granix, last survivor of an expedition from Lithone, the planet of marble. Found guilty of trespassing on the Quintessons' world, Granix is thrown into a gladiatorial arena with the Sharkticons, who devour him. Watching the grisly scene, Hot Rod and Tanker realize that the primitive Sharkticons can only differentiate between enemies and other Sharkticons thanks to some simple sensors. So, when the 2 Autobots are tried and thrown into the arena a short time later, they concoct a plan, using grease and oil from their own bodies to blind the Sharkticons' sensors and throw them into confusion. However, the Quintessons use their mental powers to telekinetically create new Sharkticons out of scrap metal that lack this weakness. But just as all seems lost, the Dinobots arrive. Grimlock has freed Sludge and Swoop, and they soon subdue the Sharkticons. Hot Rod forces the lead Quintesson to probe space with its mental powers for the location of Magnus's crew, and the team departs to join them. Magnus's group, meanwhile, arrive in the Shadow Nebula, where the sheer power of the entity's brainwaves knocks their shuttle out of the sky and sends them crashing down to Planet Unicron's moon. The entity contacts Galvatron on Earth, instructing him to come to the moon and finish off the Autobots for good, but Galvatron decides to disobey the order and remain to continue the fight on Earth. Mentlar sets about studying the substance of Unicron's moon, removing one of the crystalline scales from its surface, and this disturbance lets the entity know that Galvatron has not carried out his orders. He contacts Galvatron on Earth once more and mentally tortures him into leaving the planet at once. Wheeljack, RC, and the other Autobots watch him go, and, their spirits buoyed by the revelation that Ultra Magnus still lives, press forward in battle against the other Decepticons who remain, with Wheeljack now finally starting to really appreciate RC's abilities, and with the hint of romance now blooming between them. Detecting the Decepticons' approach, the Autobots on Unicron's moon set up decoys, basically cardboard cutouts of themselves, to lure Galvatron and his men into range of explosive charges they've planted. Magnus instructs Springer and the humans to make a break for safety while he, Blur, and Mantlar battle the Decepticons. But Rusty, seeing the Autobot leader's plan as suicide, attempts to stay and help him fight. As he does so, Rumble tries to force Daniel to watch as Dirge kills Ellen, but Daniel masters his exosuit and saves his mum from the cons, proving his independence to her. However, a second wave of Decepticons soon descends, forcing Springer and the humans to follow Magnus's plan. Magnus, Mantlar, and Blur hold the line to cover their escape, and are killed. Sensing the presence of Optimus Prime's life force, Galvatron cuts Magnus open and removes Prime's matrix to take as a prize, placing it in a bottle-like pendant around his neck. His mission accomplished, he departs to renegotiate terms with the entity. Meanwhile, Springer and the humans' escape route leads them through a strange fog bank to a dried-out riverbed-like area where they're confronted by the Junkions, an eccentric tribe of Road Warrior-style robots led by the Nazi helmet-wearing Wreck-Gar. Springer guides the humans in transforming their exosuits to flee from the strange newcomers, but the Junkions are able to capture them. Luckily, Hot Rod's group arrives and makes peace with the Junkions, presumably using the universal greeting, but the script is missing a page here, so we can't say for sure. Grimlock befriends a large Junkion named Scrappo, and Wreck-Gar provides the group with a printout of data, which Ellen decodes. It reveals that the entity was, in fact, created by the Junkion's ancestors to serve as a universal protector, but something went wrong and it became evil. The Junkions had to live behind the veil of fog to be free of it. Fortunately, the printout also reveals the entity's weak spot. But the script's missing another page, so we don't know exactly what it is. Galvatron attempts to break his contract with the entity by threatening to destroy the planet Unicron with a thermal charge. But unsurprisingly, the charge has no effect. The Autobot forces then arrive and touch down on Unicron's surface just in time for the truth to be revealed. The entity and the planet Unicron are one and the same being. Thanks to the energy provided by the Decepticons, the entity now has the power to transform to robot mode and break the orbit it has been trapped in for generations. The tree trunks and grass on the planet's surface are but hairs on the back of its colossal hands. The robot mode entity heads for Earth to finish devouring it. While the Dinobots and Scrappo distract him, the other Autobots venture inside his body, where Springer and Tanker battle his immune system of metallic leeches, while Hot Rod and the humans head for the weak spot at his core. Unfortunately, they discover that the opening to the core is too small for any explosive to fit through. But Hot Rod senses the presence of the weapon they need, and the group returns to the surface to recover Optimus Prime's Matrix from Galvatron. Galvatron refuses to hand it over and tries to destroy both himself and the Matrix, preferring nothingness to a world in which he cannot rule. But Ellen finally gets the hang of her exosuit and surprises everyone by kung-fuing the Decepticon leader into submission. Matrix in hand, the team returns to the core once more, where Daniel, the only one small enough to fit through the opening, climbs in and opens the Matrix. Optimus's life force destroys the entity from within, while Hot Rod leads the Autobots in evacuating the entity's exploding body. Galvatron is sent hurtling off into space on a piece of debris, while our heroes all triumphantly return to the healed, restored Earth for a victory ceremony at the new Autobot headquarters. After Friedman handed in the first draft, creative director Jay Bacall called up Flint Dille to get his input on it. As Dille tells it, he and Bacall concluded that the script was, basically, incoherent, and took it upon themselves to create their own script called The Secret of Cybertron. Written in a single week, this script combines select ideas from Friedman's script with an earlier idea Dille had for an episode called Journey to the Center of Cybertron, and involved Optimus Prime traveling to the heart of the Transformers world and using his Matrix to transform the planet into a robot mode to battle the entity. Dille has always said that very few people ever read this script, but the existence of a piece of concept art by Floro Deary of a robot mode Cybertron seems to suggest otherwise. To quote Dille, he and Bacall were convinced that The Secret of Cybertron was the greatest script ever written by anybody for any reason. But executive producers Joe Bacall and Tom Griffin didn't share their enthusiasm for it, and it was rejected. Sadly, this script has never been found, thus its precise contents are unknown. But Dille has always said that he reused several ideas from the story for the Season 3 premiere, 5 Faces of Darkness, including the idea of the Quintessons being the creators of the Transformers. The basic concept of Journey to the Center of Cybertron, meanwhile, would eventually become the second season two-parter, The Key to Vector Sigma. With The Secret of Cybertron off the table, it fell to Dille and Bacall to start fresh, taking the bones of Friedman's first draft and restructuring it into a new outline, tightening up the story, finalizing characters' names, roles, and personalities, and incorporating requests from Hasbro to feature more toys from the 1986 product line. The new outline was completed in March, and from there, Friedman wrote an entirely new script, which was delivered in April, then had a few pages revised in May. This version hit the same big story bullet points as the first, but now arranged into a form that was much closer to the movie we know today. The second draft is set 5 years in the future. In terms of characters, it places much greater emphasis on Hot Rod maturing to become the true new Autobot leader at the end of the film than the first draft did, as he's transformed by Optimus Prime's Matrix into Rodimus Prime. In turn, Ultra Magnus is played as a more fallible figure than the bold hero of the first draft, depicted more as just a soldier struggling and failing to fill Optimus's shoes. Wheeljack and his bickering relationship with RC are dropped, and RC is moved over to become part of Magnus's shuttle crew rather than staying on Earth. Tanker is reworked to become the pickup truck Cup, but the character remains basically the same personality-wise, while Blur's personality is overhauled to introduce his fast-talking gimmick. Rusty, Ellen, and Blaze are taken out, but Daniel remains, the only human featured in the film. Rusty's Indiana Jones-style personality is given over to Springer. The entity is renamed, with Friedman thinking up several alternatives, including Absorber, Amalgamator, and Masticar, before settling on Ingestor. And Optimus Prime's Matrix and Megatron's Essence are both renamed Life Sparks. The additional new toys that Hasbro requested be added to the second draft could be split into two groups. Figures from the 1985 product line, who would continue to be sold in 1986, with whom audiences would already be familiar thanks to the first and second seasons of the cartoon, and brand new toys currently in development for the 86 line. 1985 characters added or given bigger roles included the Dinobots, who the second draft introduces earlier, replacing Rails as the big Autobot reinforcements in the opening battle. The Constructicons, who now combine into Devastator for a big showcase fight scene with the Dinos. Perceptor, who replaces Mentlar as the scientist on Ultra Magnus's crew. Blaster, who joins the cast in a supporting role. And the Triple Changers Blitzwing and Astrotrain, who were given prominent moments amidst the action. Brand new 1986 characters added include Wheelie, an Autobot child encountered by Hot Rod's group on Quintessa, who effectively takes the role of Scrappo as a friend to the Dinobots, and Galvatron's new minions, Scourge and Cyclonus. To incorporate these two new Decepticons into the story, the second draft's version of the Decepticon fight in the Hall of Heroes includes them shattering several of the other urns enshrined there, releasing the life sparks of other dead Decepticons that drift off into space along with Megatrons. It's these additional life sparks that Ingestor then uses to create Scourge and Cyclonus. Scourge was specifically conceived to be the leader of the Gestapo Decepticons featured in the first draft. Friedman described those Decepticons as a sweep party, meaning a party that conducts sweeps. But somewhere along the way, the name got reinterpreted a bit literally, and sweeps actually became the name of these evil huntsmen, who were reimagined as identical copies of Scourge, also created from life sparks by Ingestor. Cyclonus too was meant to have his own armada of nameless duplicates at this point, but this idea was almost entirely phased out for the finished film. In it, only a single Cyclonus duplicate appears, before vanishing a few seconds later and never being seen again. Brief digression here, the life spark concept led to an interesting little mistake in issue number 80 of the British Transformers comic. While working on the movie tie-in story Target 2006, writer Simon Furman was using as reference a version of the script that contained at least some lingering reference to the life spark idea. he wound up misinterpreting a stage direction that said Cyclonus is created from life spark, and the result was a confusing scene where Cyclonus claimed he was rebuilt from a Decepticon named Life Spark. Another toy planned for 1986 was the Autobot Citybot Metroplex. This inspired the addition of an Autobot city to the second draft of the film, which replaced the steel mill and Autobot headquarters in the first act action. But clearly, nobody had been provided with much information about the toy. As the film's depiction of the city doesn't really match the figure. Most notably, of course, it never transforms into a robot mode, only moving between city and battle station forms. Before ever seeing the toy, Floro Deary created his own entirely original designs for the city, including the one you're seeing on screen right now, which transforms from city to fortress by rising up out of the ground and closing around itself like a fist. Deary notes that he also created a second design, styled after New York, and when he was instructed to redesign the city to better match the Metroplex toy, rather than start from scratch, he admits to simply pasting a few toy-based details onto this design, creating the finished look seen in the film. Another group of new toys in production for 86 were 5 wild animal-themed robots who could combine into a giant super robot. These were the figures that would eventually be released as the Predacons. But at this early stage in development, they were envisioned as an Autobot team named the Anibots, who were added to the second draft, battling Devastator alongside the Dinobots. But Friedman was provided with no information about the figures beyond their alternate modes and the fact they combined, and so let his imagination run wild, writing the team as merging into the 4-legged, lightning-breathing Dragon Beast. Now obviously this had nothing to do with what Hasbro was developing for the toys, and had to be cut from the film. But it got far enough before that happened that art for Dragon Beast was produced by Deary. It's with instances like this in mind that I think reels in the first draft could have been the result of Friedman being directed to include the toy that would become Astrotrain, but only being told that it was a triple-changing train, and again letting his imagination go crazy. That's just my personal theory, but I think it's plausible. Other new products incorporated into the Autobot City battle included Blaster's cassettes, which at this point were going to be a robot, a lion, a tiger, and a scorpion. All real, prototyped and patented toy designs, which were also set to be included in the Season 2 episode Autobop later in 1985. Friedman named the robot Bolts, the lion Cubby, the tiger Stripes, and the scorpion Stinger. But somewhere along the way, plans changed. The toy line replaced the tiger and the scorpion with a second robot and a rhino, and they were all given new names. The robots Eject and Rewind, the lion Steeljaw, and the rhino Ramhorn. Amid the changes, they were dropped from Autobop, and the film was adjusted accordingly. But while new toys meant the addition of new characters, the opposite was also true. The only confirmed casualties in the first draft were Optimus Prime, Ultra Magnus, Blur, and Mentlar. But after he was given a list of toys that were being discontinued, meaning that it was okay to kill the characters, the second draft sees Friedman begin adding the scenes of death that the film would become infamous for. In less toy-motivated changes, the second draft introduces the idea of the Autobots having a base on one of Cybertron's moons, and the Decepticons hijacking a departing shuttle and killing its crew to launch their siege on Autobot City. Also, it drops the idea of all the Decepticons being powered up by Ingestor. In Starscream's specific case, rather than gain increased power, he's killed by Galvatron when he takes back command. Significantly, Cybertron is not destroyed. Rather, the Decepticons simply send Ingestor all the energy they have stockpiled on the planet, which gives him the strength to break his orbit and begin heading towards Cybertron itself, earning Galvatron's ire by eating 2 of its moons along the way, including the one on which the Autobots are based. The whole idea of the Autobots scattering across Earth and Hot Rod and Cup having to gather a crew is dropped, with the Autobots now simply taking off aboard 2 shuttles to escape the Decepticon attack, and the long, rambling space battle that followed is massively cut down, ditching all mention of the asteroid and the hurricane, and instead involving Hot Rod's team being shot down, and Magnus's team escaping the Decepticons by faking their shuttle's destruction. However, the idea of a third plotline centered on Earth remains, with Scourge and the Sweeps staying behind on the planet to drain its energy and send it to Ingestor, and an Autobot guerrilla team led by Blaster combating their efforts. But still, it's Cybertron, rather than the Earth, that now serves as Ingestor's final target and the setting of the film's climax. The second draft's version of the adventure on Quintessa removes the Quintesson's mental powers and Hot Rod's plan to blind the Sharkticon sensors, and the Dinobots are never captured. Instead, the Dinos search for Hot Rod and Cup, but when they arrive at the Quintesson fortress, they're deliberately pointed in the wrong direction by the guard at the entrance. This is where Wheelie comes in, leading the Dinobots to where they need to go, then pointing the Autobots to the ship they need to escape the planet. Notably, the Quintessons are still described as having bodies at this point, but their depiction does move closer to what we see in the finished film, as it's revealed that their large heads are their true form. Their bodies are only prosthetic, and their heads can disconnect from them and fly around. In a big change from the first draft, the Junkions have no connection to Ingestor, who now has no explained origin. Instead of Unicron's moon, the Junkions live on the planet Junkion, where Magnus's team sets down to make repairs. The battle on the planet of Junk does still involve the Autobots tricking the Decepticons with decoy models of themselves, but it's changed significantly. Rather than using 2D cutouts to lure the cons into a trap, the Autobots use moving, 3-dimensional models of themselves constructed by Perceptor to fool the Decepticons into thinking they've all been destroyed while they escape to safety. In reality, only Ultra Magnus dies, sacrificing himself to make the ruse convincing and ensure his comrades get safely away. But unlike the first draft, he doesn't stay dead, being rebuilt by the Junkions after Hot Rod befriends them. As in the first draft, Galvatron still attempts to destroy the planet Unicron with a thermal charge, which Unicron simply absorbs. Here, it's what provides the final bit of energy Ingestor needs to transform to robot mode. The climax plays out much like the finished movie, with Hot Rod confronting Galvatron inside Ingestor and being transformed into Rodimus Prime by the power of Optimus's life spark, which he then releases to destroy Ingestor from within. One notable difference, though, is that while escaping, Rodimus finds the 2 moons Ingestor earlier consumed intact within his body, and releases them to resume their orbit around Cybertron. After handing in the second draft, Friedman's involvement with the film ended. It was now the job of Dilly to massage the script into its finished form, for which he received the credit of story consultant. This process reportedly involved many rewrites, with contributions from many different writers, to the point that Dilly calls the finished movie a Frankenstein of different ideas and drafts and people. We don't know precisely how many discrete drafts Dilly went through during this lengthy process, but we do have access to one more full version of the script, dated August 1985. This is the version of the script that's been available online since the 90s. It's very close to the finished film, outside of a couple of deleted and alternate scenes, and it illustrates the various changes made to the story in the course of the many summer rewrites. By this point, the decision had been made to advance the setting of the film to 20 years in the future, rather than just 5, to the year 2005, which allowed an adult version of Spike Witwicky to be added to the cast, stationed on a second Autobot moonbase, and for Daniel to be reimagined as his son. Other new ideas introduced by the time of this draft included the Autobots escaping Earth by using a tactic they once employed in a past battle off the planet Beta-4, which involves causing asteroids to collide with each other to create a debris field that blocks the pursuing Decepticons long enough for them to get away, Hot Rod's crew being dragged down to Quintessa by a huge mechanical claw that reaches up to grab them instead of simply shot down, the Quintessons being the servants of Unicron who hunt down those who escape his wrath, and Ultra Magnus being drawn and quartered by the sweeps at the climax of the battle on Junkion instead of being blown to bits. Now, as it happens, all these new ideas wound up being taken back out of the film, but it's apparent that the August draft, or one very much like it, was used as reference in the creation of Marvel's comic book adaptation of the film, released in summer 1986, as the comic includes all this deleted and alternate material. But perhaps the single biggest change the rewrites leading up to this draft introduced, which survived all the way through to the finished movie and required many structural changes to the story, was the decision to abandon the concept of life sparks. Firstly, this change sees Megatron have to be dumped into space on the journey back to Cybertron while still alive, rather than having him die and his spark float off. Likewise, the other Decepticons transformed by Unicron are changed to be established characters jettisoned alongside Megatron, rather than spirits of the nameless dead released from the Hall of Heroes. The influence of the concept can still be seen in the finished film, though. The flickering purple flames seen at the base of the statues in the Hall of Heroes were originally designed to be the interred life sparks of past Decepticon leaders. The bigger consequence of ditching life sparks is that Optimus Prime's spark is replaced in the story with a physical talisman of leadership, which returns to using Friedman's original name for the concept, the Matrix. Compared to the earlier drafts, in which the ability of Prime's spark to destroy Ingestor is pretty random and not really foreshadowed, the Matrix is presented as the prophesied tool of his defeat, and thus becomes the object around which the whole film revolves. Knowing it can destroy him, the destruction of the Matrix is what Unicron now demands Galvatron do for him, instead of providing him with energy. And obtaining the Matrix is what gives Galvatron the confidence to challenge Unicron, as compared to just being armed with an ineffective thermal charge. And this all goes hand in hand with the other big change. The whole third act twist that Ingestor and Unicron are the same being is dropped, in favour of depicting Unicron as a living, sentient planet from the outset, already roaming the galaxy consuming other worlds, rather than being trapped in an orbit. Thus, in this version of the story, he doesn't need the Decepticons to provide him with energy, which in turn means that there's no longer a point to the whole subplot on Earth, and it's cut entirely. Accompanying this change to Unicron's depiction, the role of Granix, the ill-fated robot made of rock encountered by Hot Rod and Cup on Quintessa, is notably expanded, with the addition of a prologue to the movie that shows Granix escaping the destruction of his world, Lithone, at Unicron's hands. This becomes the reason for his capture and execution by the Quintessons, in accordance with their role in this draft as Unicron's servants. During the development of this prologue, the idea that Granix and his race were rock robots was abandoned, and they were reimagined as wholly mechanical life forms. A decision that it seems reasonable to assume might have been influenced by the news that rival toy company Tonka were producing their own toy line and film about transforming rock robots that same year, the Rock Lords. Accordingly, by the time of the August draft, Granix, originally named after granite, a type of stone, was renamed Cranix. Key differences between this draft's iteration of the prologue and the finished version are that Unicron consumes Lithone by dissolving it with an acidic mist, and the Lithones are depicted as transformers, able to convert into spaceships, which is how Cranix escapes the death of his world. The finished film changes this so that Cranix simply boards an ordinary ship, but like other material from the August draft, the early version remains in the comic book adaptation. That, effectively, brings this look at the development of the script of Transformers the movie to an end, where the film itself begins. There would be multiple small rewrites even after this point, with 2 more slightly different versions of the script being used as a basis for the film's primary dialogue recording sessions in September, and for the finalized storyboards that were drawn up between October and December. But the differences were positively minor in comparison to how far the story had come since the previous year. Both the recordings and the storyboards still contain a fair bit of material from the August draft that would later be deleted, but some standout examples of scenes unique to these versions include brief speaking appearances by Inferno and Gears, for which actors Walker Edmiston and Dawn Messick remain credited, a death scene for Mirage, blown to bits by Megatron, and perhaps most famously, Red Alert being gunned down by the Constructicons as he, Trax and Sideswipe engage them when they tear into the city. All these and more were progressively trimmed out during animation and editing over the months that followed, until finally, the movie as we know it today was released in August 1986. If you'd like to learn even more about the differences between the various versions of the movie's script, check the description below and you'll find links to the various drafts, outlines, storyboards, and more, all hosted at the Sunbow Marvel Archive, alongside mountains of other paperwork from Transformers and other shows. There are tons more little details in there, so many I simply can't cover them all. Read them for yourselves, and you'll agree. The story of Transformers the movie is beyond good, beyond evil, beyond your wildest imagination.
god, this is tiny. What happened here? The last person tried to claw their way out or something. This is not an apartment. I've seen biscuit tins with more square footage than this. Nobody's quite mastered the art of living in a compact space quite like the Japanese, a consequence of high population densities and limited space. And having spent my first 3 years living here in a pretty damn small 30 square metre apartment, I actually found I enjoyed living in a small space, even if it meant my living room and bedroom were one and the same, and I had to roll away my bed each morning and roll it out at night. But what happens when that space isn't 30 square metres, but 10 square metres? And what happens if there isn't even a shower? I recently enlisted the help of my good friend Alex, a top real estate agent, to track down the smallest apartment in Tokyo that he could find. And find it, he most certainly did, as we take a look inside 3 tiny Tokyo micro apartments to discover how much it costs to live in each one, with a few surprises along the way. And at the end of the video, I want you to weigh up the pros and cons of each one, and let me know in the comments which of the 3 you think that you could live in and which one you think is good value for money. Spoilers, it's probably none of them, to be honest. So good to see you, Alex.
Good to see you.
Long time no see. Sashiburi. Now, normally when we meet up, we go and look at big, silly luxury apartments, the likes of which no one can possibly afford. Today, we're going for more normal, regular apartments, right?
Yes, that is completely correct. What we're doing today is going to see what an average micro apartment looks like in Tokyo.
Micro
A micro apartment. And just for the sake of this video, a micro apartment is around 30 square meters, or about 300 something square feet, or less.
Okay, we're going to look at 3 different apartments.
Yes, we have 3 different apartments today. One is going to be about 30 square meters, the second 20, and the third 10.
Oh my god,
10 square meters, about 100 square feet. That's really, really small.
Yeah, that's pretty concerning. All right, and we start with 35 square meters.
That's right, let's do it.
Let's go and take a look. Our first stop of the day is a newly built average-size apartment on Tokyo's glamorous west side, conveniently located about a 10-minute train ride from Shibuya and aimed at suave young professionals. Damn those suave young professionals, damn them all. So our first stop, pretty modern looking building. It's only 1 year old, this apartment, right, Alex?
That is correct. And inside here we happen to have a 34 square meter apartment, which is about the average size for a 1 bedroom in Tokyo.
Okay.
So you can see what most people live here like.
And how much does it cost?
Well, I'll leave that until the end. Why don't you guess later?
All right, take it away. In we go. Ooh, lovely lighting.
Yeah, nice place, right?
Nice colours, very modern.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. You know, when you walk in an apartment, you kind of know, like, instantaneously if you could live there or not. I could live there. I could do it.
You could do it? You could
Well,
do it?
well, this is about the same size as my first apartment in Japan.
Oh, okay.
It's about 35 metres squared back in Yamagata. But this is a lot more modern and a lot more echoey.
It is very echoey. Yes, yes. Well, that's because you don't have the curtains yet. That does make a big difference.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, you have a couch in here. This does not come with the couch, by the way. It's just for show.
Fine.
And also, it doesn't have a dining room table yet.
What do you think about the couch?
I think it's
Lime
a little
green?
Yeah, I don't think the color's the problem. I think it's just a little too big for here, but that's just me.
I like it. I love these kind of couches where you can, like, put your legs out like that, stretch out like this. Lovely.
Yeah, and you can almost reach the other wall by doing that too.
You can almost reach the bed. The bed becomes the rest. The only thing is, if you're going to have a TV here, it would feel a bit sketchy.
That's what I'm saying, it's very cramped in my opinion. And you do have enough space to fit a bed in here. This is the literal definition of a bedroom. It's a room with a bed in it.
It's a good bed. The only thing is access to the bed. You sort of have to jump over, like, this way, rather than the side entrance of a normal bedroom.
This kind of reminds me, do you remember the treehouse? It was the bed in the treehouse like this too.
Yeah.
You just have to crawl from the foot of the bed.
Sort of roll onto it, yeah. But it's a good, like, this size room, you know, it's really easy to heat, it's economical. All you need is 30 seconds and some heavy mouth breathing.
So yes, this kitchen is a standard Japanese kitchen, but it's of the nicer quality. You have the artificial marble countertop over here. Very nice.
Cheap marble.
Yes, cheap.
Fake marble.
Fake marble, yes.
Farble, we call it.
Yeah, that is the correct term for it. That's just a bowl. But
Fake wood.
that is fake wood. But the nice thing about this, you just pick this up, this is an extension of your counter, so you can kind of just put it over the sink and have a little bit more space.
An extension of yourself.
White and hard.
I think because my first apartment, the kitchen was non-existent, I kind of look at this and I go, wow, it's glamorous, it's amazing. There's actually some space to prepare things here. Like my first apartment, I had to use an ironing board to cook and prepare food, and now I don't need the ironing board.
You definitely don't need the ironing board because you're not ironing any of your clothes, that's for sure. But also, this place has...
Get out.
Yeah, all right. We'll just start by saying this is the nicest kitchen you're going to see today, so get used to it.
Right.
Right.
But first impressions, very good, very livable. And we've yet to see the bathroom.
We have yet seen the bathroom. So this is the bathroom. This is a pretty normal setup in Japan, where you have a toilet right over here, and a sink right over here, and the bath in its own kind of little room. And they don't like having baths and toilets in the same room over here because one's dirty and one's clean, right? But here's the bath, right? Chris, what do you think?
This is a pretty spacious bath.
Yeah, for a place of this size, they managed to... You're coming in too? Okay. They managed to put a very nice bath in here.
And what they do with these bathrooms is they put a lot of things in. So you've got... This is... What is this? The bath cover?
Yeah, that's a bath cover because Japanese people tend to take very long baths, and that's one way to save a little bit of electricity.
Like multi-generational households. They all share the same bath water.
There is that. And also, I don't know if you know about this, but baths over here have reheating things in them.
They do, yeah. So we have this panel here.
Yes.
So this is, like, really good. Actually, this is a really nice bathroom.
I'm not going to show you shit. At least not in the beginning.
Well, not until the next two apartments.
Yes.
But no, I'm really impressed with this place so far.
No, it's a great build. It has everything you need.
This is interesting. It looks like somebody's let a child loose on the pillow with a paintbrush set.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the...
Like, Benji, keep away from my pillows. What are you doing? Oh gosh, this is supposed to be art. I think what this apartment shows is it's not so much about the size, it's about how you use it. Ha ha ha. Because it's so damn modern. The lighting's brilliant, the white walls, the questionable lime green sofa. But how much is it, Alex?
So you have to remember, this place is not even a year old.
Right.
It's 34 square meters, and it's one of the top floors, and that is southwest facing. That means that you can see Mount Fuji from there.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and you have a nice balcony as well. So keeping that all in mind, what do you think it is?
Well, my apartment in Sendai was about 8 man, Hachimayen,
Okay.
80,000 yen, and that was about 2 times the size of this.
Okay.
So I'm basing it on that, which is probably not very smart, but I'm going to say Hachimayen.
So that's what? That's like $500 right now, $600.
Yeah.
It's 184,000. So that's about $1,200 right now.
At least I got one of the numbers right for the 8 number 8. That's
got the 8
mental.
right.
This is that's 180,000 yen.
Yeah. You have to remember though, location, as they say. This is very close to Central Tokyo. It is Central Tokyo, to be honest. And look, you have so much good stuff around here.
No, that's too much.
This is the nicest one we're going to see today.
Okay.
I just want to put that in your head. So you want to see a slightly worse one?
Yeah, why not? I mean, this is a good starting point.
I'd say so.
And size-wise, you can't get much smaller than this.
Oh, we definitely can.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
Look at that. Seriously, what is this?
So there's one other thing in this bedroom I didn't show you.
Right.
Yeah, so for every good bedroom, you have to have a good closet. You have
do?
a really nice closet right over there.
Ooh.
It's a big walk-in.
This is pretty hefty. For an apartment of this size, a walk-in closet of this scale, it's pretty rare. Along, of course, with the all-important allergy information. And the box ends in my mouth. Starting with this, yuzu dorayaki. Yuzu infused dough with a luscious white bean paste filling. My God, yuzu's never tasted so good. Bloody delightful. What about a side of Sakurako's creamy white banana chocolate fruits? Looks like a fruit, tastes like a dream. One of my 5 a day. And what better way to wash it all down than with Kyoto's very own Hojicha tea, infused with the essence of roasted rice. Now we're talking. And check this out, we've even got a beautifully hand-painted dish that'll fit right in my new Japanese home. Wonderful. Whether you're looking to gift a lucky friend a box of the finest Japanese snacks, or greedily keep it all for yourself, you can grab your box from Sakurako in the link in the description box below. Our next apartment is in the trendy district of Nakameguro, about a 5-minute drive from Shibuya. With that in mind, you'd typically expect a hideous price, but given this apartment is a tiny 25 square meters, maybe the rent won't be so bad after all. Into apartment number 2, and if claustrophobia had a headquarters, this would most certainly be it. Alright, It's a little bit smaller than the last one, and we go straight into the kitchen.
Yes, we get into the kitchen with its beautiful blue cabinetry.
Yes.
Not quite sure what was going on there. But this building is from the 90s, and you're going to see some things in here that kind of remind you of the 90s. Again, with the wild colors over here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sky blue. Whoa, who remembers sky blue? And I mean, the kitchen's pretty grim. There's just like one ragged stove, no preparation space here. Oh,
The water does work.
where would you put the fridge?
So that's actually, this is where the fridge goes right here. You can see the plug is right up there. So you could fit a fridge the size of your width, actually, pretty much.
It's like-
once you fit in there.
Yeah, like
There it is.
an abroad in Japan sized fridge.
Yeah, that's not that big of a
Worst
fridge.
metric measurement. It's kind of like if you want to experience Tetris, the video game, in apartment form. It's a bit like that. But come on, let's go through
Let's
to
go
the
see the
lavish
rest.
and decadent room. This is nice. This is a room.
Yeah, it's a nice size for a living room and dining room.
So this is all the room we have.
Yes, because this is not just a living room, dining room. This is also your bedroom.
Right, that complicates things a little bit because where the bloody hell is the bed going to go?
So it's funny you say that because if you just open it, no, there's no Murphy bed in
Oh.
here. I wish there was a Murphy bed in here. No, it is literally just a closet. I would say there.
Over that wall.
Yeah, I'd say right next to where you have your surprisingly usable breakfast bar. Actually.
Yes, there's a breakfast bar. Can you move this?
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
For-
See, yeah, you could prepare your camembert fried chicken dinner, pass it through the breakfast bar. This feels a little bit excessive and unnecessary, but it's nice.
Yeah, I can't really see too many guests fitting into here, so it's good if you like serving yourself.
I think if you're going to have a house party here, you'd need to take it in shifts. And like, because
Your guests have to take it in
it ain't
shifts.
going to happen.
Yes.
But like, which way would the bed go?
So I'd put my bed over here, going this way. It'll stop right about here. So it'll basically cover that plug right there.
Okay, and then you have a chair here for the breakfast bar counter.
Yeah. You could have a kind of couch bed kind of thing.
Yeah,
over
I'm
here.
thinking it would be a couch bed if I
Yeah.
was there, because then you could at least have some space to work with. I mean, in my first apartment, I had a futon, and when I rolled it away, it was actually quite a nice space.
Yes.
But we have these beautiful, lavish views, sea views, not so much. Lavish car park views. You can see all the cars. You can see all your favourites, your Mazdas, your Toyotas, your Nissan. It's great, isn't it?
It's great, and you'll never have to worry about where to park.
That's
It's
true.
perfect.
Yeah, so that's one bonus. Where is the bathroom, if there is a bathroom?
Let's go see the bathroom.
Lead the way
It's
out.
right over here. This is what they call a standard unit bath in Japan. It's all one big piece of plastic, resin, whatever. You have the sink in here as well. The really crappy ones will have a toilet in there as well. But yeah, you have a separate toilet. Actually, Chris, we didn't go see the toilet.
We didn't.
We didn't see
Is
the
it
toilet.
good?
Yeah, so just cut the B-roll for that part. But yeah, this is enough for one person, and I am not going to sit in there because it looks pretty dirty.
Why does it smell like a cheese factory that's expired? Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah, no, it's pretty bad. So what happens is if you leave pipes to evaporate over time, they'll just start smelling. So that's it. Nothing too special. Let's get out of here, though. I don't like it.
Whoa. Welcome to my breakfast bar. I think I've just smashed the window. Now, how much does this place cost? I know we're in Nakameguro, very
Yes.
trendy area, close to Shibuya, Ebisu, all the cool stuff. So it's probably going to be at a premium.
So you have to remember, we're in Nakameguro, the heart of it, in fact, only 2 minutes from the station. This place is 21 square meters, so it's not the biggest, okay? And
But-
it is from the 1990s.
But I guess if you do work in Nakameguro or Central Tokyo, it's a good place to...
Oh, yeah, very accessible. If you're a single person, this place is great, but not much more than that.
I'm kind of worried that if you do cook food in the kitchen,
Yes.
which is there, the whole apartment's going to smell like chicken and sausages.
It's
bacon,
funny you say that. I didn't
cheese.
actually show you this, but there is a
Oh,
door
okay.
right here.
All right.
Yeah, so
That's how you get
Oh,
around it.
Alright,
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that this apartment, the last one I got it
The
wrong
last
by
one
a
was
factor of
184.
184,000 yen
That's
for an
right.
apartment that was almost twice the size,
Mm-hmm.
with amazing views of Mount Fuji on a good day. I reckon this is 130,000 yen,
Wow.
which is what, $900?
Yeah, let's call it. Yeah, not even. No, it's 850. That's pretty close.
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually only 120,000 yen.
What a bargain.
Yes.
To live in a Tetris shoebox with car park views in the heart of Tokyo where the action is. I think I could live here under the right circumstances.
Yeah.
Very
yeah.
special circumstances indeed. All right, time for the third and final apartment. Can't get much smaller than this,
Let's
Alex.
go see it.
Let's chop his arm off.
Ow. Ow.
For our third and tiniest apartment of all, we head off to a back street near Yoyogi Park, a superbly connected area between Shibuya and Shinjuku. Typically this location would be the end of all your pocket money, but given this place is a ridiculous 10 square meters, surely there's a real bargain to be had. Oh, this is different.
Yeah, and it's even...
Wow.
Yeah, so this place, I just want to tell you, is not pet friendly, but it does come with some friendly pets.
Oh god, there's a stink bug just walking on the side of the door. Isn't that lovely? If you're into your insects, it's perfect.
Yes.
My god, this is tiny. This is not an apartment. This is... I've seen biscuit tins with more square footage than this.
So this is, as you can see, the entire apartment. This is what they call a yojohan, because you have 4.5 tatami mats.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. Really. Yeah, so this is your everything room.
I mean, yeah, when you're awake, it's a living room. When you're asleep, it's a bedroom. When you wake up, it's a panic room, because it's like a claustrophobic nightmare when you wake up in here. And it's so hot.
It is quite hot.
Because tatami smells really pungent, right? It smells like rotting rice and...
I wouldn't say it's that bad.
Right, it's not that bad, but it's very pungent combined with the humid heat. Oh, or maybe it's the stink bug on the door.
Yes.
What happened here? The last person tried to claw their way out or something.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what happened with this. I will also say, though, that there is no electric going on in here right now. But even if there was, it wouldn't really matter with the temperature because there is no AC. And there's also no way to install AC.
There's no air conditioning?
No, look around. Do you see one?
Oh my god.
No.
Like, you couldn't live here.
No, honestly.
You'd need like a mega fan. Like a fucking wind farm in the corner to try and keep you cool.
Yeah, I don't think it has a ventilation system at all. Yeah, no, it's... Nope, that's it. Water's not on
Running
either.
water? No.
Oh, yes, very nice. And I want you to note, there is something missing in this kitchen.
Well, there's a lot of things missing. Oh, there's no toilet.
I was talking about the kitchen, but yeah, so we'll get to the toilet in a second.
Oh, there is a toilet? What?
Well, no, so first off, this is where you would put your...
stove?
Exactly. It does not come with a stove. You have to buy one yourself.
You could fit a microwave there.
You could, but then you wouldn't have a stove now, wouldn't you?
I mean, stove, microwave, you decide. What do you want, viewers?
Yeah, stove or microwave, leave it in the comments. This is actually where you would hook up the gas for the stove.
Okay.
So that you would just put it right there. But then, that means you don't have any counter space whatsoever. So basically what you would be doing is having a little table right here where you do all your chopping on, bring it over there, do your cooking, and then... I thought that was a bug. And then eat right here. Take it out, put out your futons, and sleep here too. That's pretty much it.
Is there a toilet?
There is definitely a toilet, just not in here.
Oh, okay.
Never fear, guys, the toilet is merely 3 meters from your front door. Though when you see it and smell it, you might be a bit reluctant to use it.
It smells interesting. It's a squat toilet, so, I mean, if that was a normal toilet, I'd be like, yeah, okay, but squat toilet as well, it's the final insult. You don't want that, especially given there's no shower or bath. Yeah, not ideal. To be fair, it's better than the car park view. You still get a little bit of a view. You see a tree in the distance.
You can see a tree, yes, and you can see right into your neighbour's window as well.
Yeah,
so that's nice.
that's good. Let's leave that open.
Yes,
my God, actual sauna in this room.
Let's get down to the good parts about this place. There are a couple of them.
Okay. Is there? What's wrong?
I'm thinking of what the good parts are. Yeah, well, no, so the only good part about this place is that it's 4 minutes to the station. So
perfect.
Yes, you're 4 minutes from Hatagaya, which is a really cool area of Tokyo, and you're also 10 or so minutes from Yoyogi.
I mean, how would you even, is this how you would sell it as a real estate genius?
To be honest, I've never really had anybody looking for something quite like this, so I don't quite know how to sell this.
I mean...
Ample storage. Yeah.
I never thought I would look...
That's it.
You know the movie Harry Potter when he lives under the stairs?
Yes.
I never thought I'd look at that and go, oh wow, that looks nice.
Yeah, well, I mean, so in Japan they have a similar thing, Doraemon, you know that character?
Yeah, the little cat.
He sleeps in here.
Right. I'd fucking sleep in there. It looks like you can fit a bed in there, to be honest, and then you've actually got some cooking and preparation space. So how much is this to rent? I guess I've got to think of a number now.
Right.
So we're near Harajuku. No,
we're near Hatagaya. So that's really close to Shinjuku and Shibuya as well.
And Yoyogi Park.
And Yoyogi Park, very close.
Good location.
Great location, absolutely. Hot as hell, and no fridge space, to be honest. You can't even really fit a fridge in here at all.
The fridge will have to remain firmly in the realms of imagination.
Yeah,
along with a lot of other basic standard living.
How about a washing machine? You can't even fit a washing machine here. We talked about the toilet, but we didn't mention anything about the bath. So the thing is about this place.
Heavy breathing. What's that?
The thing about this place is...
There is no bathroom.
Or shower?
No. Nothing.
How does that work then?
So on
Just
the...
bathe in the sink?
No, on the listing page they say there is a Sento nearby, so there is a public bathhouse nearby. So yeah, you have to go over there, spend 300 to 500 yen per time.
My God, that's quite pricey.
Yeah, that's about what you're gonna
Negates some of the magic of staying here. But again, we don't know how much it costs yet. So I've got to guess it's going to be a low number.
Yes.
Not going to lie.
Oh, by the way, this place is 11 square meters. Let's just get that out of the way.
11 square meters.
Yes, 11 square meters. So half the size of the one that we just saw in Nakamura.
It's only marginally bigger than a capsule hotel capsule.
That's true.
So I'm going to say, I don't know, this should be free, really.
Yeah.
But Niman N, 20,000 yen. If it's any more than that, I will eat my fingers.
Yeah, salt them up, my friends. But
What is it?
33,000
No!
yen. Yes, so Samman Sanza yen, 33,000 yen. So that's about $200 right now.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Who do you think this is aimed at?
First off, this place is only for single people. You cannot lend this place with two people. I mean,
What
you
if-
could fit two people.
What if
anyway.
you're single and then you start dating someone?
Then you gotta move to another place. It's in the contract. You have to be single.
Really?
Or you have to be a single person. Yeah.
Wow.
So, who is this for? I would say people who are just starting up, you know, or maybe like really, really broke students.
I've just moved to Tokyo.
You
I'm a
just moved to
student.
Tokyo. Yeah, you're making $1,500 a month or something like that. This is where you're gonna be living.
The only thing I will say is the tatami mats are quite nice.
Yeah, these are brand new.
Tatami's good quality. The doors look nice.
Yeah.
The interior, apart from the wall where someone looks like they were murdered and clawed at the wall in their dying moments, apart from that, the room actually looks okay, and the kitchen doesn't look so good.
To be honest, I have seen worse.
Yeah.
And
So it's,
I heard something,
what?
like a little scream or something. You didn't hear that?
Stink bug? A scream?
I don't think they scream. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm getting some weird vibes in here, not to lie, but
Did somebody die in here?
no, actually, no, this is not one of those. This is what you get for 33,000 yen a month in
Wow.
Tokyo.
I think you could do a lot better if you go outside. Again, it's the location, right?
Yeah.
It's really central at the moment. Pretty good location. If you go out the front door, you're in the middle of the action when it comes to Tokyo.
Honestly.
But for 30,000 yen, you could get a much nicer apartment if you went 1 hour away.
Oh, even if you went 10 minutes away.
So I
honestly.
think if I had to choose between living centrally for 30,000 yen in a place like this and living like 30, 40 minutes away in a normal place, I'd go for the latter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because in Sendai you could get something the size of the first place we saw for this much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Can't do that in Tokyo.
Tokyo
No.
doesn't come cheap.
Absolutely.
Surprise, surprise. Well, thank you for showing us around, Alex.
Yeah.
Check out Alex over at Tokyo Portfolio, where he goes and shows people around luxurious, decadent, silly houses that none of us can normally afford. Let's get out of this sauna.
Yeah, let's please.
I suppose the good thing about this room is you don't need to buy a sauna, because
That's-
the room is the sauna.
That's it.
Yeah.
I'm schwitzing like
Saving
crazy.
money already.
Let's get out of here.
Jesus Christ, get me out. Keep an eye out for the stink bug. Ugh. Get a free pet with every room.
In today's video, I'm going to take a look at one of Batman's oldest and most well-known foes, the Catwoman. She's arguably one of Batman's most recognisable villains. Although not really quite a villain, but definitely not a hero, but at least most of the time. Delving into her comic book origins, Catwoman made her debut in April 1940's Batman #1, which was released just about a year after Batman's very first appearance in Detective Comics 27. This comic is also notable for containing the first appearance of the Joker. In the golden age of comics, it was very common for comic books to contain multiple short stories rather than a single lengthier adventure, and this comic is no exception. It contains 5 separate stories: The Legend of Batman, who he is and how he came to be, The Joker, The Giants of Hugo Strange, The Cat, and The Joker Returns. There's only one story that is particularly relevant to today's video, and that is The Giants of Hugo Strange. No, it's The Cat. In this story, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson find themselves on a yacht trip with several other wealthy citizens and are tasked with protecting a $500,000 necklace from a mysterious burglar called The Cat. It turns out that The Cat is actually a beautiful woman, masquerading as an elderly woman. It's in this first appearance that the sexual tension between Batman and the Cat is established. She's clearly smitten with him and offers to start a criminal empire with him, acting as the king and queen of crime. Of course, Batman cannot be tempted, no matter how attracted to her he was. The Cat would soon change her name to Catwoman, presumably because it was much more trademarkable, and she would commit crimes in a variety of costumes, including this bizarre proto-furry cat mask, and use her sex appeal to try and tempt Batman over to the side of crime. And that's basically how each Catwoman story would go for the next decade, until the publication of Seduction of the Innocent in 1954, a book that claimed comic books were responsible for the moral degradation of the youth of the day. The ensuing moral panic resulted in some fairly big changes to the comic book industry. No more controversial characters, such as the sultry Catwoman armed with her whip, and gritty crime stories were dropped. Instead, each story would focus on some wacky sci-fi adventure for the better part of 15 years. Catwoman, with her not-so-subtle sexual undertones, generally wasn't used again until after she appeared in the 1966 Adam West starring Batman show. Catwoman made her return to Batman comics in 1967, right in the middle of Batmania. However, despite being one of the most popular villains from the show, or perhaps because of it, Catwoman didn't get any major character development in the years that followed. For some reason, she was given an array of costumes that screamed anything but cat. Take this blue costume with a weird red mask. What exactly was wrong with the black catsuit from the show? Maybe it was considered a bit too BDSM-y? I don't know. During the mini-renaissance of classic Batman villains in the 1970s and 80s, Catwoman was mostly absent. She didn't get her own versions of the Joker's Five-Way Revenge or Half an Evil, stories that redefined classic Batman villains, the Joker and Two-Face respectively. The best we got was writer Doug Mensch bringing her back as an anti-hero of sorts. She would try her best to do the right thing and avoid committing crimes, but she would invariably end up on the wrong side of the law. Catwoman's character didn't see any major developments until the seminal Year One storyline in Batman 401 through 407, published in 1987. Writer Frank Miller reimagined Selina Kyle's early days as a Gotham City East End prostitute. Yes, I know Miller has a habit of making his female characters either saints or whores, which is very psychologically revealing of him, but this characterization didn't feel too out of place. His Selina Kyle was a defender of the other working girls, and she took inspiration from the newly emerged Batman to create her costume of her own, which she used to take control of her life. The costume, designed by David Mazzucchelli, was a grey bodysuit complete with cat mask and a tail. It was, at this point anyway, her best costume. Certainly much better than the purple number with the green cape. It's at this point that we come to the creation of Batman the Animated Series. Their version of Selina Kyle is a wealthy socialite/animal rights activist who steals to fund her charitable work. She's almost a Robin Hood type in that she only steals from those who can afford it, and she puts the money to good use working with charitable causes. I believe that the intention was to make her more of a morally grey anti-hero, to show that her stealing was done for a good cause, adding a bit of variety to Batman's rogues gallery. Early designs for the character strongly resembled the Julie Newmar version from the 1966 show, with long dark hair and big cats that she could call to her defence, but this seemingly was scrapped fairly early on. I have previously talked about how the creators of the show were strongly encouraged to synergize with the Tim Burton Batman films. Batman the Animated Series would debut a few short months after Batman Returns released, and while there seemed to be some grumbles about making the Penguin an obese mutant, the influence on Catwoman seemed to be less troublesome for the crew. The primary aesthetic change they made, it seems, is giving Selina Kyle blonde hair to match Michelle Pfeiffer, and ultimately that didn't really change much. When it came to her costume, recreating the black leather with white stitching look from Batman Returns likely wasn't practical for animation, and frankly, that whole BDSM look was probably a bit too extreme for a Saturday morning kid. The white stitching look And ultimately, that didn't really change much. When it came to her costume, recreating the black leather with white stitching look from Batman Returns likely wasn't practical for animation, and frankly, that whole BDSM look was probably a bit too extreme for a Saturday morning kids cartoon. So instead they opted for a look inspired by the Year 1 costume, a grey catsuit complete with cat ears, with black gloves and boots, acting as a callback of sorts to the Batman Returns costume perhaps. Frankly, most of Catwoman's early episodes aren't particularly good. The Cat and the Claw Part 1 was the first episode to air in the UK, and I still have very vivid memories of the opening scene with Catwoman scaling the building and her cat Isis stealing the jewellery. Speaking of Isis, another original creation from the animated series, she is by far my favourite addition to the character of Catwoman. It's amazing how expressive, loving and loyal that cat is. And did you know she was voiced by the voice of Scooby-Doo, Frank Welker? Isis is one of my favourite original DCAU creations that found her way to the comics. Yes, other DCAU creations like Harley Quinn, Renee Montoya and the Condiment King are probably more well known, but I love how loyal and affectionate this cat was. When my wife and I got our first pets together, we named one of our cats Isis. While she could be fierce and aggressive at times, she was also loving, affectionate and loyal, very much like her namesake. Anyway, Isis aside, The Cat and the Claw is a fairly standard action-adventure story. The first part at least has some impressive action scenes, but part 2 suffered from worse animation and a generally vague plot. Just what was Red Claw's scheme? What is this cause that she and her men have dedicated their lives to? How were they able to persuade the chairman of a billion-dollar company like Multigon to sign up to her terror campaign? Answers on a postcard, please. Catwoman's next appearance follows on soon after the end of The Cat and the Claw. In Cat Scratch Fever, Catwoman's beloved cat Isis is infected with a man-made virus by the nefarious Roland Daggett. And this is generally a pretty poor episode. The animation, provided once again by ACOM, is slow and plodding, and the story itself is only passable. Having said that, I do enjoy the final scene with Isis. How heartwarming. And the pseudo-swearing from Daggett's henchwoman Jessie.
So kiss off, you dumb quack!
This episode primarily serves to illustrate the horrors of animal testing and show what a lazy, cruel and heartless person Daggett is. But we already knew that from his earlier appearances in Feet of Clay and Appointment in Crime Alley. It does, however, establish the important plot point that, after her arrest in The Cat and the Claw, Selina Kyle cannot commit any more crimes in the Catwoman costume or she'll be sent to prison for years. This will be important later on. No longer being able to commit crimes leads to Catwoman occasionally helping Batman, and sometimes needing Batman's help, like the time she got turned into a real Catwoman in Tiger Tiger. She's willing to be more vicious than Batman, and isn't always able to see the best in other people. Her next main appearance, Catwalk, is probably the best Catwoman episode because we start to see signs of Catwoman's villainous nature poking through. While she has been trying to keep her nose clean, for the most part, she just cannot suppress her true nature. She likens herself to the endangered and extinct animals throughout the episode before exclaiming,
You know what, Isis? Extinction's for wimps.
All it took for Catwoman to throw her life away was to be angered by the hypocrisy of Veronica Vreeland. The Vreelands were personally responsible for the extinction of several species of animal, and now she comes out talking about her family as protectors of the animal kingdom? Outrageous. Selina gives in to her darker urges and assists the ventriloquist and Scarface with robbing the Vreeland Museum exhibit. In a move that surprises absolutely no one, the ventriloquist and Scarface double-cross Catwoman, leaving her as the patsy for their crime, and this ultimately leads to her downfall. So yeah, that was pretty predictable. But the thing I find really interesting about the later parts of this episode is the scene where Catwoman realises that she's been duped and sets out to get her revenge. Catwoman learns that the ventriloquist and Scarface had stolen a number of stuffed extinct animals whose extinction had outraged her so much earlier in the evening. But when she's caught by Batman and faces a long jail sentence if he takes her in, she doesn't hesitate to abandon her beliefs, throwing one of the stuffed carcasses into the fire, telling Batman to choose between arresting her and preventing that species from disappearing entirely. What a hypocrite! Animal rights were the cause that Catwoman would use to justify her crimes, but you can see even as far back as The Cat and the Claw that she just enjoyed stealing. She always loved taking things that didn't belong to her, and getting away with it scot-free was just the cherry on top. It makes her feel strong, clever, and superior. In terms of character development, this scene acts as a course correction for the character. Catwoman visibly abandons her cause of defending animals when she throws the stuffed animal on the fire to escape Batman. It was genuinely surprising to see her abandon her moral code as soon as it became inconvenient for her, underlying the flaws that ultimately define her as a villain. She's a liar. She lies to the police, she lies to Batman, she lies to herself. Catwoman next appears in the episode Batgirl Returns, where she is framed for the theft of a jade cat statue and teams up with Batgirl to prove her innocence. However, this was all a ruse to 1. Find the person that framed her, 2. Punish him, and 3. Take the jade cat statue for herself. I'd argue that it's this episode in which Catwoman is most like her comic book counterpart, and I do really like it, just not quite as much as Catwalk. The thing that's really unique about Catwoman is that she has a clear narrative arc in BTAS. When she's introduced, she is an anonymous cat burglar, stealing from the rich to save needy animals. Then, when she's caught, she's forced to give up the life of crime and instead do some good. Sadly, it doesn't last, and eventually she gives in to her baser nature, indicating that it was the act of stealing that brought her joy, not benevolent acts of charity or kindness. By the end of the series, she has completely accepted this about herself and has no delusions about heroism. She's quite happy lying and deceiving people, even those she genuinely seems to like, such as Batman and Batgirl. When the time came for BTAS to transition over to the new Batman adventures, and they were no longer forced to reference the Tim Burton movies, Catwoman maintained this characterization, likely because it resembled her comic book counterpart, a thief that stole for fun with dark hair. The change in hairstyle was explained in Batman Gotham Adventures 4. Selina had been dyeing her hair blonde for years, but when she learned that the company that made her hair dye had been testing on cats, well, let's just say she doesn't take the news well. Catwoman made 2 appearances in this show, and in both episodes she showed herself to be playful, mean, affectionate, and disloyal. Not entirely unlike a real cat. In You Scratch My Back, Catwoman attempts to manipulate Nightwing into unwittingly helping her recover some of her precious loot by playing into his negative feelings towards Batman. In her second appearance, she continues to use her feminine wiles to manipulate both Batman and the leader of a cat-worshipping cult of murderous thieves, who also happen to have a massive mutant cat in their underground arena, all for her own gratification. Neither of these episodes are particularly great or provide any deeper insight into the psychology of Selina Kyle, but they shine the spotlight on Catwoman's playful side, with some genuinely amusing dialogue.
I don't believe it. You're going to try to steal from them again, aren't you?
I see it more like teaching them a lesson.
So ultimately, the BTAS and TNBA versions of Catwoman are probably among the most authentic to the comics characters this show has produced. It's interesting that while so many villains were quite drastically changed, often for the better, Catwoman was fairly true to her comic book counterpart. The one element that they added to the character, being an animal rights activist, was eventually stripped away, giving us an origin story for the deceitful, deceptive thief she would become.
I said I'd let them take me, but I didn't say how far.
I think we can all agree that one of the best things about Batman the Animated Series is the way they handled the villains. They gave a lot of love and attention, not just to the big names like the Joker, Catwoman and the Penguin, but also the more obscure villains like Mr. Freeze, Clayface and Two-Face. One of those obscure villains is the subject of today's video, Poison Ivy. Now, one of the things that I think many people don't realise is that before Batman the Animated Series, Poison Ivy had never appeared outside of the comic books, and even then, she was a mostly forgettable, vaguely plant-themed villain. When she was introduced in Batman 181 in 1966, Poison Ivy's motivations were to become rich and famous. According to her co-creator Carmine Infantino, Ivy was originally created as a throwaway female villain, with the potential for her to be used in the Adam West starring show. The only reason Poison Ivy came about was because of Catwoman on the Batman show. They wanted more female villains. That show, because of it, we were selling 1 million copies a month. But that show, when it died, so did the comic books. I don't find this throwaway remark about Poison Ivy surprising after I read her debut. A lot of Batman's villains' origins are revealed in their first appearance, but Poison Ivy just appears with no real psychological motivation or backstory driving her. No, instead she has shallow motivations. She wants to be the best, the most beautiful female villain in Gotham, and she uses her sexuality as a weapon, occasionally supplementing her feminine wiles with a blowgun loaded with poison darts, hypnotic lipstick, and explosive hair. Moving on. Beyond her plant costume and chloroform lipstick, she didn't really have much of a gimmick other than being attractive and wanting to ensnare Batman. So it's not hard to see why she didn't really make many appearances over the next decade. In fact, she didn't even get a proper origin until the 1970s in issue 252 of World's Finest, in the second part of a two-part story pitting her in a sapphic battle with Wonder Woman. Ivy was identified by the FBI as Lillian Rose, a young woman who had been betrayed by her college professor lover. Stating that he was too poor to be able to give her the life that she deserved, Lily stole a sample of ancient Egyptian herbs from a museum, thinking that if he could study the herbs, he'd find fame and fortune and finally be able to marry her. Unfortunately, he double-crossed her, making her ingest some of the herb, leaving her for dead, and running off with the herb with plans of selling it to the highest bidder. However, Lillian didn't die. Instead, she became resistant to poisons and had a thirst for revenge. She was also inexplicably able to transform her former lover into a tree man named Redwood, and force him to do her bidding. The early Poison Ivy is a woman scorned and lashes out at the world, but even this added dimension didn't see her popularity increase. For the next decade, she only really made a handful of appearances as a member of the Secret Society of Supervillains, but only as a background character rather than a major villain. In the 1980s, writer Doug Mensch brought Poison Ivy to prominence with a storyline in which she used her hypnotic lipstick to force the board of Wayne Enterprises to sign over control of the company to her. Mensch also leaned into the science fiction horror element of the character, having her work with a malevolent botanist to create an army of green ghost plant creatures that would follow her every command. The next big development of Poison Ivy's character would come from Neil Gaiman's short story in Secret Origins 36. Ivy is in prison and is visited by a recruiter from Task Force X, also known as the Suicide Squad, to see if she would make a good candidate for joining the team. During her interviews, she reveals that her previous origin was a lie and that her name is Pamela Lillian Isley. Studying under Jason Woodrue, the Floronic Man, she discloses that his experiments killed her, giving birth to Poison Ivy, the Queen of May, crowned in leaves and blossom and thorns. This story first sows the seeds of Ivy being more plant than person, but it wasn't really capitalized on in the comics. She does exhibit some control over plants, but also comes across as a deranged lunatic. Her most notable appearances came in the late 80s when Ivy joined the Suicide Squad. In this series, she was mostly used to control plants and hypnotize men with her kisses. But there was no benevolence. She acted entirely in her own self-interest. It's at this point that we come to Ivy's appearances in Batman the Animated Series. This show is the first time that Poison Ivy appeared outside of the comic books. Returning viewers of my videos will be familiar with the show's writer's philosophy of taking the best things from the comics and dropping all of the associated guff that had built up over the years. But for those that are here for the first time, here's an excerpt from Batman the Animated Series story editor Marty Pascoe's interview in Batman the Animated Podcast.
In our approach to the show, what we did is say, we are not going to be bound by any comics fans' idea of canon. We have a rich mythology here that goes back, at that point it was 60 years. And we said, why not just cherry pick from the best of it?
In the episode Pretty Poison, we are introduced to Pamela Isley, fiancée of District Attorney Harvey Dent, and a talented botanist working for a cosmetic company. While she puts on a front of being a fragrance designer, at heart she is an eco-warrior, not motivated by greed or vanity. Instead, she seeks revenge on Dent for indirectly causing the extinction of a breed of rose with the construction of Blackgate Penitentiary 5 years ago. Gone are the male botanists whose coattails Ivy would ride, and gone is the connection to the plant being from another dimension Jason Woodrue. At least until the Batman and Harley Quinn movie a couple of decades later. Ivy is her own woman, and no one is propping her up. She uses a combination of her own natural beauty and a potent poison of her own creation to lure Dent in before she finishes him off with a tainted kiss. It's interesting to note that Bruce Timm, who is often credited as the driving force behind the look of BTAS, struggled with the design of Poison Ivy. He recounted in his Modern Masters book, "There's a really talented cartoonist/artist named Lynn Naylor. She designed Poison Ivy because at the time my female characters were just coming out too stiff and too masculine." In the same book, Timm describes his design for Poison Ivy as horrible, citing the proportions as an area he struggled with. BTAS's Ivy is genuinely unhinged and sees no issue with murdering someone for causing harm to plants. Additionally, she was able to create a gigantic and vaginal-looking Venus flytrap that seemingly had a taste for men. In Pretty Poison, Batman being ensnared and dragged towards the flytrap is a pretty overt metaphor for him succumbing to her and her vagina dentata, representing emasculation. Ivy, like many of the villains in BTAS, has a legitimate gripe with society, and she is entirely right to be outraged by the way that those in power are destroying the environment. But it's her methods that are wrong, and that's what brings her to the attention of Batman. Ivy's character is further fleshed out across BTAS and the new Batman adventures, although as the series continues, her motivations tend to focus more on accumulating wealth, presumably to fund her experiments. The writers of the show, particularly Paul Dini, lean into the idea that Ivy is a brilliant botanist, responsible for her hideous creations. She starts with creating her own deadly poisons, but eventually moves to creating plant-based life forms that do her bidding, all without anybody else's help. Horror-tinged Poison Ivy episodes like House and Garden and Chemistry are among some of the best in the entire series, so check those out if you haven't already. It's this characterization of Poison Ivy that has really defined the character since the 1990s. And yes, you could argue that her popularity could be in part due to Joel Schumacher's much maligned Batman and Robin, but I would argue that they took Pamela Isley down the same path. The other enduring contribution to the character of Poison Ivy provided by BTAS is her partnership with Harley Quinn. Initially framed as an odd couple close friendship with subtle hints at a sexual relationship between the two, DC has since taken the ball and ran past the censors of the 90s, placing Harley and Ivy in a relationship in both the comic books and the more recent Harley Quinn animated series. Batman the Animated Series took the relatively unknown and mostly unloved character of Poison Ivy and gave her some depth, inspiring a whole new generation of creators. Without this show, it's hard to believe that she would have made it to the big screen, or be prominently featured in shows like Gotham, Batwoman, and Harley Quinn. Thanks to viewer Alex Lemons, who suggested this video and sent me over some cool images to use.
October 16th, 2023 is going to be the 100th year anniversary of the Walt Disney Company. And of course, a company as prolific as Disney is going to celebrate and cash in with every merchandising option imaginable, from special mouse ears to shirts and apparel, keychains, dog collars, stuffed animals, and of course, special edition Lego sets. I mean, hell, even the predecessor to Mickey Mouse, Oswald the Unlucky Rabbit, is getting in on the action. But if you're a Kamen Rider fan, there's a particular piece of Disney's 100th anniversary special merchandise that you probably know about. The Disney Imagination Belt, or the Disney Driver as it's become known online. Right now, there isn't a ton known about the Imagination Driver, but from what I can tell, it's shaped like the Disney Vault with special keys that can be inserted from the side. It's very reminiscent and gives vibes of the Keyblades from Kingdom Hearts. Right now, all we know are the keys that may be released in the future from their silhouettes. Everything was revealed at this year's Tokyo Toy Show. While there isn't a ton known about the driver and the possible release date, I would be lying if I didn't say it's so unique that I would really love to have it in my collection. And while it's still a pretty cool thing for a Disney fan, it's hard not to immediately recognize that this is 100% an inspiration from a Kamen Rider belt. From its size to the straps that wrap around your waist, and the interchangeable collect them all gimmicks. It's everything you would expect out of a modern day transformation Kamen Rider belt. And if I'm being honest, I think the thing looks really sharp and flashy. And I would love to see this in a show where it's some Disney-inspired Kamen Rider who's like down and out against a Cinderella stepmom monster. And then bam! Magically, through the spirit of belief, The hero gets a fairy godmother key and gives the villain the old bippity boppity boop. And obviously this isn't the first time Disney and Bandai teamed up to make tokusatsu-inspired Disney stuff. I don't think I'll ever stop longing for the Super Sentai-inspired Toy Story combining mecha. This did make me start thinking that while in the US Kamen Rider is not a household name, you can still find its presence in all kinds of places you don't expect it. And while this isn't a comprehensive list, these are a couple of my favorite Kamen Rider appearances and references. And if I miss a Kamen Rider reference that you love, leave a comment and hopefully I'll get to it in a future video. So obviously, we're gonna see more Kamen Rider references in Japanese anime and manga when you compare it to Western media. But that doesn't mean it's not worth pointing out a couple of fun moments. Like in the anime Ah My Buddha, a harem show that most people watch for the story, and in one episode features a show within a show called Kamen Ranger, featuring Shocker-esque mooks from the original Kamen Rider, and then pans up to see Kamen Ranger Hyper 3, an obvious nod to Kamen Rider V3 combined with Power Rangers. Later in the episode, you get to see a newer series of Kamen Ranger, featuring a transformation sequence that may have well been ripped right out of Kamen Rider Faiz, even making mention that there's a lot of good-looking actors, featuring the Kamen Rider mom fan craze, talking about how all the shows have changed so much over the years since they were kids, sounding like every adult friend I've ever tried to show Sentai or Kamen Rider, and every reference they have is for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Throughout the episode, it just keeps circling back to Kamen Ranger, riffing on the live mall appearances and even the local heroes, complete with a hero-turned-heel climatic battle, or at least one full of fan service and tentacles. And of course, the harem from the show start their own Sentai team, along with the male lead transforming them into the Exorcism Rangers. The show it's not great, but it is really stupid fun. So I'm someone who likes anime sometimes. I definitely don't watch everything, and I tend to jump headfirst into a series or two and then go on a long break. And for a long period of time, there's one show everyone told me I should be watching, and that was Bleach. For the longest time, I knew more people who watched a significant amount of Bleach, but no other anime series. So I'm going to find it super interesting when a series that got so big in the West has a character who's just a blatant, shameless Kamen Rider reference, all in the form of Mashiro Kuna. They wear an all-white bodysuit with orange accents and riding gloves, as well as an iconic scarf that's kind of a throwback to Showa-era Kamen Riders, with a pair of goggles on her head that I have to assume are a reference to Kamen Rider's eyes. When she puts her mask on, it almost feels like a henshin. She even has her own version of a rider kick, the signature move of every Kamen Rider, called the Mashiro kick. And this victory pose is just mwah. And while we're talking about transformation poses, let's not forget about Saber from the Fate series, with a direct copy of Kamen Rider Black's henshin pose. And you know, I've heard there's a bunch of Kamen Rider references inside of Digimon. But honestly, I don't know anything about Digimon, so I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about it.
Hey, man!
Oh, hey, it's Carney X.
Oh, you're still talking about Kamen Rider, huh?
Oh, yeah, I am. I actually just found all these really cool references. In this one scene, they're actually referencing...
Yeah, I don't really care, honestly. But there are some dope Kamen Rider references in a good Toei property. Digimon. The first reference is a bit blink and you'll miss it, but really cool, and that is that in Digimon Cross Wars, or Digimon Fusion for you dub watchers, in episode 1 we can see some posters in Taiki's bedroom that heavily resemble existing tokusatsu heroes. To me, some of them look like Double, Axel, possibly Eternal. Is that Deno in the top right? I don't know. The poster on the left may also be a reference to other tokusatsu shows like Metal Hero, though I can see a bit of a resemblance to Kamen Rider Birth too. And this actually goes a little bit deeper than just a reference to another Toei show, as Digimon Cross Wars writer Riku Sanjo has also worked on several tokusatsu projects, including Kamen Rider Drive, Kamen Rider Double, and the Sentai series Yuden Sentai Kyoryuja. He even worked on the recent Futo PI anime, which I'm sure you've heard about watching Hi-C's channel. Then is a small batch of Digimon that I think are very noteworthy and all come from a similar era. The mere existence of these Digimon, especially around the turn of the century, are Kamen Rider references. Digimon Adventure 02 and Digimon Tamers were airing during the Kamen Rider revival, alongside Kuga and Agito, and this is incredibly clear in the Digimon of that time. Digimon Tamers and beyond gave us Justimon, a clear reference to Kamen Rider, who has 3 different arm changes he can take on, very similar to the forms of various Kamen Rider, and in particular seems to be homaging Rider Man. Justimon even does a Rider kick, but it goes deeper even, as Justimon's X-Antibody form, kind of evolution, sort of, mode change you could say. X-Antibody's kind of an evolution, basically it's a different form that Digimon can take, don't worry about it. Develops a red hue and gives him access to all of Justimon's various arm types, rather than just one at a time, in a form reminiscent of different stages of Kamen Rider Fourze, but in particular Fire States. Justimon's belt even changes to a sort of Kamen Rider belt Digimon virtual pet hybrid when Justimon becomes Justimon X. Then rolling it back slightly, Digimon Adventure 02, Sylphimon very clearly has the Typhoon belt of Kamen Rider Ichigo, but also Ken Ichijoji's partner Stingmon is clearly a reference to Kamen Rider, with the grown-up Ken in the 02 epilogue seen to be a policeman or investigator with Stingmon, and the parallels between Stingmon and Ken Ichijoji and Kamen Rider Kuga and Ichijo are incredibly obvious. Given 02 aired at the same time as Kuga, and is from the same company, as some sexy, hilarious, humble Welshman once put it, there's no way this was a coincidence. And finally, a slightly surprising one even for Digimon fans, is that Kenji Watanabe stated that Omnimon Merciful mode from Digimon Adventure Tri was inspired by various heroes and properties spawned by Shotaro Ishinomori. To quote Mr. Watanabe, "I wanted to bring out a bit of Japaneseness, so I made one armor sword a Japanese sword. At the same time I was conscious of the hero. I've always liked drawing and manga because of the influence of Mr. Shotaro Ishinomori. Of course the heroes are Ishinomori characters, such as Kamen Rider and Cyborg 009. Merciful's wings look like a muffler. When I first came up with the idea, it had angel-like wings, but Koji Ito, the animation director and Digimon animation designer, requested me to make it fluffy with something like cloth. When I heard those words, I thought, oh, that's right, it's a muffler. It's interesting because if the muffler becomes wings, the angel's part will remain. And under the eyes, the so-called tear line is also from Kamen Rider and Kikaider."
That was interesting. Thank you for mansplaining Digiman to me, Karn.
Yeah, whatever, mail me my appearance check. See you later, houses. Toku is mid!
Well, anyway, Rider references in Japan are to be expected. But the thing I find more interesting is when Kamen Rider finds a way to get references into more Western TV shows. Now, none of these are as blatant as Kamen Ranger, but I think these quick nods and references are super cool. Like most people in their 30s, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And now I make videos about tokusatsu. I know, it's shocking. So, it's the small things that warm my heart. Like this scene from the 2012 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series. In the 4th episode, when Michelangelo is performing his kata, he throws in a quick Kamen Rider V3 transformation pose. I love this. It really feels like two little parts of my world kind of come together.
The secret kata.
Or like in these IDW Transformers comics. You can find references in the background characters to Kamen Rider Den-O or Kamen Rider V3. There's also quick references to Kamen Rider Amazons and Kamen Rider Agito. This isn't really super surprising because the artist of the comics is Matt Frank. He's a well-known tokusatsu fan and the artist for the Godzilla IDW comic line. But the Turtles in comic books, they kind of make more sense to have these references. There's also these small background nods that I think are just really cool to spot. Like in an episode of How I Met Your Mother, where in the background there's figurines of Kamen Rider and V3 just sitting there chilling in the background. It just really makes me wonder, like, what made the set designer grab these and use them as props? Is it just something they chose from their collection? Or did they just get it from a grab bag they have laying around of nerd props? Or this episode of a Disney kids show called Liv and Maddie that ran from 2013 to 2017, from the special episode Voltage Aruni, which features a superhero origin story with a soundtrack that sounds like something out of Tim Burton's Batman, all part of a fake superhero show called Skyvolt. Liv ends up fighting Joey, who has his very own modified Deca driver. It's small things like this that I am just enthralled by. All part of a fake superhero show called Skyvolt. Liv ends up fighting Joey, who has his very own modified Deca driver. It's small things like this that I am just enthralled by. I just love it. I love thinking about a costume designer who's a fan like me. And they're just like, well, we have this crazy superhero episode. That's it. Time to bust out the Deca driver. Throwing out a small calling card for nerd toku parents that might be watching the show with their kids. Or just watching it. I mean, I watch Japanese kid shows for fun, so no shame. But there's also music, a place that I have found some of the most fun Kamen Rider references. Like Jay Chow's music video for Listen to Mom, featuring Kamen Rider Ryuki right in one of the first shots, hanging out in the background for most of the video alongside Astro Boy and the White Devil, and a kid wearing a plastic Kamen Rider Blade Halloween mask, and rocking a Kamen Rider #1 transformation pose. A video like this gives me a feeling of kinship. And not just that we both like the same type of superhero. It's because we're indulging these silly attachments that we've forever been told we're supposed to leave in childhood. But I find that these tokusatsu superheroes have given me an infinite creativity. It's an attribute that as an adult, I have found incredibly freeing. Now to go back to some music that I knew as a teenager. One of my favorite Tokusatsu in America references is with the Aquabats. The Aquabats Super Show has tons of Tokusatsu inspired little bits, and it proudly wears love on its sleeve of cheesy special effects. But it's the short 1999 TV pilot demo titled The Aquabats in Color. It is just stuffed full of 1970s and 80s camp and charm, with references to the Adam West Batman and TV serials, and features a ton of Kamen Rider and Tokusatsu references, like the opening shot of all the Aquabats on motorcycles, and their version of a Typhoon driver, their version of the Evil Shocker Combat Men, and a big red evil monster, with the addition of stock footage being reused from Godzilla, Bolton from Ultraman, and more, all set to the band's soundtrack of ska-infused pop-punk. I got a bootleg VHS tape of this when I was a teenager, and I loved it. And as an adult, I was pumped to finally hear they got to spin this off as the Aquabat Super Show. Okay, this one is probably the weirdest reference that sticks to me personally, and that is the band Powerman 5000. Powerman 5000, or PM5K for short, is a band that I got really into as an early teenager, but I kind of left it behind until recent years when I've rediscovered them. This may seem like an odd thing to focus so much on, but Powerman 5000 through a tokusatsu lens just makes a lot of sense. The band is led by Spider-1, the vocalist. His real name is Michael Cummings, and the band has had various overall sounds. If you walk through the band's entire discography, there are a lot of really dramatic sound shifts. Thematically, the band has a ton of pulp science fiction overtones. I always thought of PM5K as a modified science fiction band, very similar to the way that his older brother, Robert Cummings, better known as the musician and movie producer Rob Zombie, used a lot of modified horror tropes in White Zombie and Rob Zombie. The band's early albums were kind of a fusion of rock, funk, and hip-hop. It honestly almost sounds like a more prototype version of modern-day nerdcore. And in hindsight, those albums are probably like 20 years too early. Their 1994 album, True Force, features an altered version of Kamen Rider Black. This always kind of blew my mind. Like, I watched Masked Rider as a kid before I got into this, but really had no idea about Kamen Rider as a franchise. And so I always wondered if they were like somehow related to each other. Like, what was the decision process that led us here? Was Spider-1 just a really big Kamen Rider fan? Or was it simply a cool sci-fi image that he just slapped on an album cover? A year later in 1995, they put out the album The Blood Splat Rating System. This also featured Kamen Rider on the cover. So you have to think that this wasn't a fluke. There's a reason they put Kamen Rider on both covers. And it makes me wonder, was that planned to be continued? But these albums were independent releases, and they later signed with DreamWorks Records. And they re-released the Blood Splat Rating System as Mega Kung Fu Radio. And if I know Toei, as the band got bigger, there's no way they were going to allow them to use Kamen Rider on the record. You know, without paying handsomely. Powerman 5000 later had a runaway success with their 1999 album, Tonight the Stars Revolt. which featured science fiction overtones about campy topics like space travel, annihilation from the stars, and informing everyone what it's like when worlds collide. It also had a lot of more serious undertones like anti-consumerism and alienation and isolation and classism, bringing up some of the deeper thoughts you get from a good piece of science fiction or tokusatsu or something like Kamen Rider 01. Unfortunately, Kamen Rider did not make his way in any of the album art, but they still use plenty of tokusatsu references. I mean, you take one look at the music video for When Worlds Collide and I mean, you tell me this guy isn't straight up a tokusatsu villain, or just all the VFX that have been implemented, or the costumes, or the so 90s alternative rock hairstyles. The music video had so much character to it that when I saw it at like 2 a.m. as a teenager, I became obsessed, leading me deeper into my love of science fiction and eventually tokusatsu. The single that followed When Worlds Collide was Nobody's Real. It features a kid who picks up a futuristic robot helmet and sees alienation and the disingenuous nature of people around him. And by some weird turn of luck, I actually have a friend who owns the helmet from this video. Unfortunately, it was resting on a shelf, and because music is life, he pumped up the jams too high and it flew off a shelf and took some damage. But he's super awesome and let me come over and film what was left of the helmet. So, thanks Dave. Powerman 5000 is still an active band today, releasing their last album, The Noble Rot, in 2020. Spider-1 is now directing horror movies. As of this recording, he's released Allegoria, Bury the Bride, and later this year, Little Bits. So yeah, if you haven't, go check it out. It's been a really fun band to rediscover. And to wrap all this music and this video up, I want to talk about my favorite Kamen Rider music reference. And that's an Easter egg from our boy KK Slider from Animal Crossing, performing Go KK Rider. It's a song in the style of the original Kamen Rider theme. It also has this amazing artwork of KK Slider on a rider machine, and I think I want this as a poster on my wall. That's all for this video, and I am sure I'm missing a ton of other Kamen Rider references and media. If there is something you would like to see covered in a future video, please leave a comment. Until next time, I'm High C, and I hope you keep watching.
Welcome back, everybody, to Caravan of Garbage, where we're going through 5 movies where they're sort of connected, but they're not really connected.
They're not connected at all. They're connected in our minds.
Yeah.
They're connected in our very souls.
Well, I thought I found a connection last week in
Tommy guns?
Tommy guns, yeah.
There's a Tommy gun in this, I think.
But is there a sequence of Tommy gunning?
No, there's not a sequence of Tommy gunning. There's one half-hearted Tommy gunning.
I think that might count then.
Yeah, okay.
All right, okay, we're still on track. But if anybody knows anything more definitive that links these movies, and not comic book movies that nobody saw,
yeah,
and whatever.
or the old-timey 30s, because that doesn't count either.
No.
Or like, look, you know it when you see it. But also, I think the next week is gonna. If there's a Tommy gun in the next one, I'll be very surprised.
Well,
yeah,
we'll find out, won't we? Anyways, leave a like on this video because we're talking about 1996's The Phantom.
The Phantom. Australia's own The Phantom.
Now, why do you say that?
Well, look.
Because it's not true.
It's not true at all. But The Phantom is an American comic book created by American Lee Falk in the 30s. But like Neil Finn and Mel Gibson before he went bad, while created in America, we've claimed The Phantom as our own.
That's right.
And I think the reason for this is, if you'll indulge me, James, I'm going to have to explain to our mostly American audiences about the show bag.
Oh, okay, right.
You love a show bag, right?
No, they fucking suck.
Because they're really expensive and filled with garbage?
Yes.
But also... So, folks, in Melbourne, which is where we're from, there's a thing called the Royal Melbourne Show. And it started out, like in the 1800s, as like an agricultural show. You show up and you bring your prize pigs or whatever, and they give them a ribbon.
Yeah, and they shear a sheep and a guy cuts a block of wood or whatever, which I love, by the way.
I love the wood carving too.
I love a wood chop!
But modern audiences, James, and modern show goers.
Modern times call for modern methods.
Exactly, and that means selling people a bunch of garbage.
Yep.
Right? We were no longer happy with the the prize cow or whatever. So the innovation of the Royal Melbourne Show is a show bag, which used to be like a bag of samples, and now it's just every year for a couple of weeks a year, it's like thousands of bags of licensed crap.
Yep.
Right? Anything you can think of, any sports team, any movie franchise, any candy bar. There'll be a show bag specifically for that, and it usually contains some stuff vaguely related to that brand, and then it also contains cheap plastic garbage like a toy or whatever that'll break on the train ride home. And it also contains a Phantom comic for no reason. Like, they sell thousands a year, and I reckon at least 50% of them have a Phantom comic in them for some reason. So it's been drilled into our head, Stockholm Syndrome style, that the Phantom is ours and we love him. Just these black and white newsprint comics.
Do you love the Phantom, though?
I don't hate the Phantom.
I like the idea
and
of the Phantom.
I didn't even, maybe it is Stockholm Syndrome because we've been doing this for a month, but I didn't even hate this movie particularly.
No, I didn't either. I think it's, I don't know, imagine a guy in purple tights beat up a bunch of guys who look like Indiana Jones.
I love that.
But it's not as good as Indiana Jones.
Nope.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. Man, they really chew through the origin of this at the start, don't they? But I feel like that would have been a really good opportunity to do like a 10-minute pirate kind of prologue adventure, you know?
Right. But I think
Phantom Origins Year Zero.
Oh my God. And we could show how he got the purple cowl.
Exactly.
Where did he get the purple dye? In Bengala or wherever. Nobody else has anything purple. It's the 30s. Purple.
A laser did it.
A laser. Oh, probably a laser did it. Yeah. No, you're probably absolutely right. But I think they probably went, you know what? Let's get to the meat of it straight away.
Yeah,
you
fair
know,
enough.
But I think they didn't want an audience to be like, this is a pirate movie? I haven't signed up for a pirate movie. I signed up for a purple tights movie guy.
Yeah, Gina Davis's pirate movie had recently bombed. So I don't
Cutthroat
think,
Island.
exactly,
right.
But also Muppet Treasure Island. So what do you do?
That's right. It's so hard to thread that needle. You know what I mean?
Anyways, I really like Billy Zane in the role, even if I don't love the character.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. Again, he does have a look of a man who doesn't know what a sports Walkman is. He's got great hair or a wig. I don't know what his deal is.
I'll talk about it later.
I don't know what his deal is ultimately.
I've got notes.
Okay, I'm glad. But he's also got the experience of a crime fighter and a man who fights evil, but he's also got a certain naivete about the real world kind of thing.
Like how he doesn't understand US currency despite living there for quite a long time.
Or women.
Or women,
the two things. There's a moment where he's had a brief adventure with Diana. He's had a brief adventure with the woman of the piece.
Yep.
And then they're chilling and relaxing in his skull cave, and he's like, oh, to commemorate this occasion, just a beautiful piece of priceless jewelry. That is a terrible mistake to make on a first date. What are you thinking? What are you thinking, Kit Walker, which is your real name, by the way?
It's true. The thing is about this character in this movie is I don't like him that much, and that's his fault.
Right.
Because I want to like this guy. Like, I like Billy Zane, but yeah, it is that naivety. There's kind of I don't know if it's a smugness, but kind of a wishy-washy kind of whatever kind of attitude.
Okay. Do you think it's because he's a nepo baby?
Okay, so for those
he's riding on the good graces of his dead ancestors.
Oh, let's talk about that. So the way the Phantom works is it's a guy.
He's a ghost. James?
No, mate.
He's an immortal man, and he lives forever. And he's a what?
No, you missed.
What do you mean?
You missed the multiple parts in the movie where they explain that he's not an immortal man. He's a regular man.
It's a magic man.
No, it's a lineage of superheroes passed from father to son. Not always. Sometimes there's a woman Phantom, but not that often.
Well, I mean, you know, how are I to know? I'm a simple man who looks like Indiana Jones with like a dirty Henley and a hat on, and I just think everything's I'm so credulous, if I may. The idea that the bandit's encountering the Phantom and thinking that he's some kind of immortal spirit would be more believable to me if it wasn't just daytime when they first see him, and it's obviously just a bloke in purple tights.
With guns.
With guns.
Because why would he need them?
It's just he's like, I killed the Phantom. That's a man in a mask. It could be anybody. You killed his dad, but you could have killed anybody, and anybody could have found the costume.
Well, his dad, like, no wonder James Remar killed him.
Yes.
So apparently that version of the Phantom was born in 1872 and died in 1932, which makes him 50. But Patrick McGoohan was clearly 67 at time of filming. That dude should not be the Phantom.
Absolutely not.
What are you doing?
Unless you continue to age in your death, like in the afterlife.
Maybe that's it, yeah.
Or, again, maybe Kit Walker hasn't seen his dad in so long that he can't really remember what he looks like.
Yeah.
Because is this guy magic or is he not magic? Is this guy a ghost or is it just all in his head?
That's a big problem for me of this movie, is the vagueness concerning all the mystical, magical stuff.
Or again, maybe Kit Walker hasn't seen his dad in so long that he can't really remember what he looks like.
Yeah.
Because is this guy magic or is he not magic? Is this guy a ghost or is it just all in his head?
That's a big problem for me of this movie, is the vagueness concerning all the mystical, magical stuff. There's a moment at the start where they have an Indiana Jones-esque sequence where they go into a temple and then a skeleton strangles a man.
Yeah. First thought I was like,
he's
it's this guy,
joking.
it's a guy playing a trick.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, it's probably some cables and some gears or whatever. The Phantom set that up. Nah.
Like, I could even get around, like, a bunch of skulls that probably have some diamonds in it that make a laser. I'll happily accept that.
Sure.
But I will not accept that you put a couple of those together and they point to a picture of a map on the wall. Like, what if you put them together in a different room? Does it go and find a map?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. If it does that, how?
It hails the trolley car, and it gets on, and it pays its nickel or whatever, and then it takes a trip, ding, down the road to the Museum of Natural History.
I'm sorry, there needs to be more specifics in terms of how the magic and the mysticism in this movie operates. The thing about the Indiana Jones movies are, and it's all of them, I would say, even the ones you don't like, there is an in-universe logic to the way things operate. You know, the traps and the trials and the things that he goes through and the like. There's like a mechanism behind it. And I know they're far-fetched, and then sometimes he sees God or an alien or whatever.
Okay.
Whatever. But there is a structure to that that they adhere to that this movie just doesn't do at all.
Absolutely.
And I fucking hate that.
Exactly. Like if maybe Kit Walker, the Phantom, thinks that his father's just a hallucination in his mind, but then it turns out the power of the skulls is, you know, bringing him back from the afterlife or something. At least it would tie it all together.
Sure, yeah.
In a way, you know?
Anyway, the costume's good.
I was going to say the costume's good. The costume
It's textured and form-fitting.
It is, and it first of all, he's ripped as hell, which doesn't hurt at all.
Big time.
In a way you did not have to be for a superhero movie in this era at all. The Shadow. We just talked about it. But yeah, this sort of pioneered that MCU costuming trick of like you take the four-color, flat, textured costume from the comic books and you add
raised webbings.
You add the raised webbings and so forth. That being said, I think they could have gone harder and made it look more sort of armored, because now it sort of looks like a rash guard for people who don't want to take their shirt off at the beach. You know what I mean?
And if you're this guy, though, you would want to
You
take
would
your shirt
absolutely
off.
do it. Yeah.
I mean, if I look like that, I would podcast shirtless.
Absolutely.
I think, though, there are some good stunts in this. I would even say Indiana Jones-esque. So one of the earlier action sequences, they take the truck stunt from Raiders and the bridge stunt from Temple of Doom and they just kind of mash them together.
That's right.
It's a pretty solid effect,
Yeah.
I would say, yeah. There's a moment where a horse is running as fast as a plane somehow, caught up to a plane. Whatever, I guess, internal logic of this movie. Who am I to question that, I guess?
That's
you
right.
know? And, you know, they drop down onto the horse and it all looks very convincing and practical. And I think there's some genuinely good stuff in this. And what else could you expect from the director of Free Willy or Lightning Jack?
Lightning Jack! Australia's own Lightning Jack!
Australian director, that's right.
Love that. See, I told you this was Australia's own, The Phantom. I told you.
Yeah, you did.
Who else can we talk about? We got Treat Williams.
Oh, yeah.
As Drax, and let me tell you, that man is a treat.
Kind of brings a tear to the eye, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not that much. I'm enjoying he's chewing a bit of scenery. He's a successful businessman, but he's also just an insane murderer for no reason.
Do you like his microscope knife machine?
He's
just stab him. What are you doing?
Just a very specific microscope with hidden telescoping blades that leaves a dead body just right dead center of your office, and then you have to drag it away.
I also feel like that wouldn't kill somebody. You'd
Yeah.
have a man stumbling around spraying blood from his eyes.
Yeah, on all your priceless paintings and leather-bound books and
You
so
have to
forth.
push him out a window or
Yeah,
something. You have
right?
to guide him to a window.
Guide him to a
I'm
window.
actually taking you to the doctor's office.
Oh, thank you.
Push out the window.
I don't know how those knives got there in that microscope. He's like, why don't you look in this microscope? And he's like, I can't see anything. Why don't you adjust it on the side there? I can't find. It's there. There's a dial. If you could just, no, the other dial. No, you're changing that. No, that's not it. Gotcha.
You do get
Gotcha.
it. I think Christy Swanson as Diana Palmer is good. They have a good chemistry for the most part, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess. Apparently they cut out a lot of the more romantic subplot. And of course, one Catherine Zeta-Jones appears in this movie.
That's right.
That's right. Now,
As the bad girl turned good. Spoiler alert. She's like, sure, I'll murder all these people, but also,
I'm sorry?
yeah, maybe, I don't know.
I've stopped.
It's been a big whirlwind of a couple of days, so I don't know, honestly.
Also, Shao Kahn turns up in the end.
He sure does.
He's like, hello, I'm from Mortal Kombat.
That's
And it's
right.
always good to see that guy. He also killed the Phantom.
Yeah, like from what era though?
Exactly.
How old's that guy?
Did he kill Kit Walker's son? Did he kill a 4-year-old boy?
Maybe. Maybe the Phantom's dad had 2 kids, and he killed the better one.
Oh, okay.
Maybe
yeah.
this guy's like the understudy.
Second Phantom.
Second Phantom.
I guess that's how the Phantom can work. Also, if I was the Phantom, I would be having kids straight away.
To pass it on immediately?
Yeah, man. Get out of the game. Like, obviously his dad did it way too long. You don't want to be doing that at 67.
No. Well, his son had to go and study art at college or whatever, you know.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
No, you live in a cave. You live in a cave and you ride a tiger or whatever you do, Mason. Do you think?
You ride your Phantom horse.
Thank you. Very good, yeah. I also think, like, the ultimate kind of weapon that they're after here is, like, we need to get all the skulls together because the skulls shoot a laser.
Yep.
Who cares?
Right?
You're on the cusp of nuclear technology.
You have seaplanes. This movie's sponsored by big seaplanes. There's so many of them. It can nearly outrun a horse. That's their slogan.
Nearly.
Yeah. One day, if you keep buying these seaplanes, one day we'll invent one that's faster than a horse.
Anyway, but just like, what are you going to do with a collection of laser skulls? It's like having a Tommy gun, really, isn't it?
Oh.
It's only good if you can run in and, like, laser someone with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you could write your name on the moon, potentially, but that would be hard.
I think so, too.
Do you think so? But I did love at the end
Yes.
when they figure out that there's a fourth skull.
Oh, yeah.
It's the Phantom's ring.
They have a Dragon Ball battle.
They have a Dragon Ball battle. And then the villain does the smooth criminal lean before he explodes.
That's right. And he says, unbelievable.
Yeah.
I love that. I wouldn't believe it either.
No.
No, well, that being said, I've just connected 3 skulls together and started shooting lasers out of them, so maybe I would believe it. Oh, this was probably how the day was going to go, honestly.
Earlier I saw it point to a map. I guess this is on brand for the skulls.
It is a skull you have there, and you're wearing a skull. I mean, skulls, it's a popular motif for all the way around the world, I suppose.
I mean, the internal logic of this universe is fucked. I guess this is fairly common.
Probably fine. I bequeath my knife microscope to my henchman in my will before I go.
So, if you don't mind, it's time for the Fanvia.
Okay.
We're doing some Phantom trivia, Mason.
I see.
So, like with last week's movie, whatever it was, Shadow.
Yes.
It was the Shadow, wasn't it?
It was the Shadow, yes.
Yeah. Sam Raimi was actually considered as director for this, and Bruce Campbell was considered for the role of the Phantom.
Oh, that could have worked.
I don't mind that at all. But reportedly, Billy Zane was a huge fan of the property and had been for a little bit leading up to this.
Would you say he was a big fan?
Yeah.
Spelled F-A-N, just the regular way?
Yes.
That's great. Very fortuitous then.
I think so.
Spelt with a P-H. Fortuitous.
Billy Zane pumped iron for over a year to fill out the Phantom's costume.
Damn.
Now, initially, a Batman-like costume was created with fake muscles, like that coward Michael Keaton.
But then he simply burst out of it.
That's right. So they didn't need that by the time filming had started. Now, here's where we get into some wig logic.
Okay.
I have some issues here.
Because I would say Billy Zane, famously, just a very good-looking bald head, I would say.
Agreed.
But I've always wondered, did he, like when he's in Titanic, is that a wig?
That's a wig.
That's a wig.
The word on IMDb is that Billy Zane shaved his head to get the Phantom cowl to fit as closely as possible.
Okay.
But this was obviously difficult because when the Phantom was out of costume, he needed a full head of hair. So apparently all those scenes needed to be shot earlier in production. And the scene where the Phantom removes the cowl, apparently that was shot in 2 parts in reverse order over several weeks. But that is simply not true.
Okay.
I did some research. If you look at Billy Zane from this era, he was a balding man, which is totally fine. I think he just shaved his head. Again, looks incredible with a shaved head.
Because when you have on a movie, when you see someone with a full head of hair and they put a bald cap on them, it is seamless and completely flat. So the idea that you would need to shave your entire head to put on like a decently bulky cowl.
It's not true, Mason.
It's not true, is it?
It's simply not true. Anyways, Billy Zane should have been Lex Luthor at some point, as people
that
say.
would have been great.
Yeah, I know, right? 90s Superman movie?
Yes, please.
Kidding me? Now, this movie was originally going to be the first of a trilogy, like I think all of these movies that we've talked about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Billy Zane originally signed up to do 2 sequels, but obviously because this made about this much money.
Oh, you've made the going to the toilet sound.
I did, didn't I?
Which is very rarely positive when it comes to box office.
That is correct. Because on a budget of $45 million, it only made $23.5 million.
Ouchie, wouchies.
I don't think it's... I mean, There's movies from this era that did much better than this, which are much worse.
Oh, absolutely,
I feel.
yeah.
Yeah, that's just my thinking.
Hi, Ben the editor here. Okay, I gotta interject here to say something real quick because James and Mason are wrong. The Phantom is a brilliant, earnest pastiche of old Hollywood serials, and it is genius. While The Rocketeer does some references to Hollywood in the 30s, The Phantom comes out saying, I am Hollywood in the 1930s. See, the vagueness is part of the point. The story doesn't really make any sense, and being this kind of hero isn't very practical or useful. Pulpy heroes like this didn't have complex backstories back then, or even strong motivations for what they're doing. They had their gimmick and a desire to fight crime and help people, and kids found it really fun. I'd call it a purposeful simplicity, not a vagueness. I mean, just look at Billy Zane's performance. This is one of the best things I've seen all year. The acting style is totally different and very specific. He's captured the exact energy of the over-the-top physical acting that you'd find in the old adventure serials. He knows exactly what he's doing here. Every movement he makes looks like the most important thing he's ever done. Watch Billy Zane playing an old Hollywood hero trying to open a door. It's magical. He perfectly embodies the bland hero character of the era. And I mean hero as in the archetype itself. He's a hero just because he is. Someone that kids could look up to, a strong, powerful, good man, the myth of the infallible white savior. That's how Superman first started before he became interesting. The Phantom relishes in the old storytelling styles for the intrinsic fun that it was back then. It's borderline escapism just to watch it. There's a key moment where he's chasing after the bad guys and then this happens. That right there is what old heroes do. It's a Richard Donner Superman moment in a very classically minded film. I was practically cheering at the one-liners and dramatic poses because that's the fun of the movie, and it makes sense why it wasn't successful. It's honoring an old storytelling tradition for a very old character at a time when audiences wanted new ideas. It almost functions as a parody, but it's too earnest in its portrayal to limit it to just that. It's a really clever and fun adventure film way ahead of its time, and I highly, highly recommend the viewing experience if you are a cinema nerd. Okay, bye.
Now, in 2008, Paramount Pictures were considering actually creating a sequel to The Phantom with Zane, Swanson, and Catherine Zeta-Jones returning in their roles. But instead of a sequel, a reboot of The Phantom was in the works, and it's called The Phantom Legacy.
Oh.
Now you're going to love this.
Go on.
Australia's own Sam Worthington.
Sam Worthington is Australian?
Yeah, he was being considered for the role because there was that 4-year window where he was
tapped to be in everything, yeah. They were like, well, this guy's going to be the next big star. We better get him in the movie and fulfill the prophecy.
Exactly.
Spelled with a PH, but not where you'd think.
But of course, I know you probably want to talk about the Phantom reboot TV show, so go on.
James, I'll be honest, I didn't watch it, and I don't know anything about it. All I know of it is this.
You bring it up all the time.
I know. All I know about
this is when you would do it. How are you not prepared for this?
I didn't think
about
it.
You even mentioned it in a previous video. I'm fairly confident.
But I didn't have time to watch it. But all I know, and also, where am I going to get it? What's it on? I'm going to get it on a burnt VCD.
I bet it's on YouTube. What was it called? Let me check.
Just The Phantom, I guess, on Sci-Fi. But I'll give you this, James. All I've ever watched is the trailer, and there's a moment where the new guy is revealed to me.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
The new guy's, he learns of his destiny to be the next Phantom.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'll be the Phantom, but I won't wear that stupid costume. He's wearing the stupidest costume imaginable.
He looks
it's
like
the worst thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. Would you like to see more Phantom in the future? Say, for example, they could take some characters like the Phantom, Mandrake the Magician, Lothar, Flash Gordon, and then you're making a Defenders of the Earth movie basically all of a sudden.
Defenders of the Earth. Defenders. Out of the sky, his rockets ignite.
You could do that.
I'm just kind of surprised they haven't attempted that yet.
Yeah, there was a comic book series called King's Watch.
Oh, yeah.
Which was something similar, and it was kind of like a modern day take on that. They got all the characters from King Features Syndicate, where the Phantom is from, and they put them together.
No, he's from Australia. I think you're fine.
And made a little limited series, and I think that's actually quite good, so people should check that out, I reckon.
Maybe they should. And you know another thing people can check out?
The Phantom 2040 animated series?
No.
The Phantom 2040 video game series.
Oh, okay. I'm listening. Is it good?
No. Hey, here's a fun fact. Did you know that originally the Phantom was going to be an idle playboy named Jimmy Wells?
Why would I know that?
You would never know that, but I'm telling you now, and I'm going to quiz you next week, so you better remember that fact. But he's in this. He's in the movie. He's just like a supporting character.
Oh, he's the one who's like,
the other guy.
I'm in love with you.
And a lot of people have said perhaps the reason that the Phantom isn't as popular in America is because he wasn't that. He wasn't an American playboy.
He's Australian.
New York City style.
Yeah.
Instead, he was an Australian legend.
He's an Aussie bloke.
That's right. A real larrikin is what he is.
That's it.
Spelled with a PH.
Yeah.
A farrakin. I don't know what that is.
Do you know what, though?
What's that?
You can actually see these videos early if you head over to bigsandwich.co. It's basically our private Patreon. You know,
basically.
Well, it is. It's, you know, if you like what we do here and you want to support, but also you want to get some bonus stuff, you can, because we do movie commentaries. We've actually done one on The Phantom.
Halfway through watching this movie this time, I was like, oh, yeah.
We watched that recently.
We watched that very recently.
Yeah. There's also bonus podcasts. There's video game Let's Plays. There's just a whole bunch of good stuff there that you might be interested in, including our podcast, The Weekly Planet, where we talk movies and comics and TV shows. That comes out there Sunday as opposed to Monday. All of that is ad-free and exclusive if you are interested.
I love that.
Or just subscribe here or do whatever.
Let's do that.
Whatever. Anyways, thank you to Ben and Lawrence for the edit.
Thank you, Ben and Lawrence.
And we'll see you on the next one. Oh, we're doing the Green Hornet. I think that people probably know that.
The Seth Rogen one that no one's seen.
I don't know if that fits in this, but we're doing 5.
Yeah, you already made that graphic where you put the 5.
I mean, I didn't.
Someone did.
Ben did, yeah.
You commanded it to happen.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Grab that gem, you guys. We'll see you next time.
Grab that laser skull. Do a big lean.
Okay, if this video does really well, I'll switch over to saying that.
If it gets
everywhere.
1 million views?
Yeah, if it gets 1 million views.
Okay, great.
The world is just about to witness a tragic disaster. Millions across the globe have tuned in to watch the first participant of the Teacher in Space program ascend into space. Excitement is building as the Challenger space shuttle is just moments away from launch. The time is 11:38 AM and it's the 28th of January 1986. The shuttle is just about to lift off the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, and although initially off to an apparently good start, just 36 seconds later, the craft is hit by a strong wind shear. Not long after, a small plume of smoke is seen. At 60 seconds post-launch, Capcom informs Challenger to go at throttle up. Just 5 seconds later, the Challenger began disintegrating, and quickly after, a fireball consumed the shuttle stack. The world had just witnessed the loss of one of NASA's cutting edge in human space travel. Today we're looking at the Challenger disaster. My name is John, and welcome to Plainly Difficult. So this event happened 3 years before I was born, and my first true exposure to it was via one of my favourite films, Koyaanisqatsi. Ever since the first time I saw that film back in secondary school in 2001, I'd been fascinated by this disaster. Something as apparently infallible as NASA easily became the victim of its own confidence. Our story today would even lead to a new term, normalised deviance, which probably can be applied to a lot of subjects on this YouTube channel. Right, let's get cracking with a little bit of background. NASA, during the design phase of the Apollo missions, sought out a more cost-effective reusable heavy spacecraft for orbital missions. The concept was decided upon in the early 1970s, and its design was set in March 1972. The design had the orbiter, which housed the crew and payload, with 2 separate reusable solid booster rockets and an external fuel tank. During the mid-1970s, the first orbiter, named Enterprise, was constructed. She couldn't actually go into space, but acted more as a testbed for the systems needed for the project. Eventually, over the coming decades, 6 orbiters will be built, but for today's video, we will focus on just one shuttle, Challenger. She was manufactured by Rockwell International, originally being intended as a structural test article to be completed in 1978. After which she was sent to Lockheed for 11 months of vibration tests, designed to simulate entire shuttle flights from launch to landing. We will pause with the Challenger story just briefly to talk about how the orbiter actually gets into space. So, to get into orbit, the orbiter's engines are first to fire up, and a few seconds later the solid booster rockets also start. This is enough to get the spacecraft off the launch pad. After liftoff, the stack goes inverted. The solid rocket boosters and the shuttle with its external tank separate. This is roughly 2 minutes after flight has begun. The solid booster rockets deploy their parachutes, land in the sea, and they are recovered, sent back to land and refurbished for reuse later on. So the orbiter and the external tank continue to ascend, with the orbiter's main engine still firing. The external tank is separated from the orbiter. The external tank, after being jettisoned, disintegrates in the Earth's atmosphere. Okay, so that was a very basic description of how the orbiter gets to orbit. For more information, I'd recommend watching maybe a Curious Droid video. Apparently people think we're related. We're not. So after its mission, the orbiter was designed to re-enter Earth's atmosphere, and upon re-entry, glide to Earth and land much like a conventional aircraft. Well, wasn't that little side tangent exciting? Well, let's get back to the history of the Challenger. It was decided that Challenger should have a new lease of life after her experiments, and was to be converted into a full-blown orbiter. She had her refit for spaceflight beginning in 1979. Many of her parts were sent back to her manufacturers for reworking. She also even had a new fully functional crew module added. The refit took around 3 years, with Challenger rolling off the production line in July 1982. Her first flight was as STS-6, lifting off on the 4th of April 1983. She would take into space over her operating life, the first African American, first woman, first Dutch person, and be the first night launch and landing. She was used more often than Columbia between 1983 and 1986, making her the go-to orbiter, amassing 10 flights and over 62 days in orbit. But we'll have to talk about an issue with the shuttle program, and it was around those solid booster rockets, the SRB. Now, those two solid booster rockets were vital to the launch, as they provided the most amount of thrust at the beginning. They were built by Morton Firecool. Each one consisted of multiple sections. Each section was constructed in Utah separately to be put together at the Kennedy Space Center, ready for use for blasting an orbiter into the sky. Of course, this requires a joint between the sections, and this came in the form of a tang and cleavage joint. There were 3 in total for each SRB, and they have several vital, especially important for this video, components. So the tang and cleavage joint works like, hang on with me, this is relevant to the disaster, like this. With the tang being the upper segment connecting the two sections by fitting into the lower cleavage section. There is a retaining pin, clip and band placed to hold the two sections together. The joint is also externally wrapped with fiberglass reinforcement tape. To create the seal between the sections, 2 rubber O-ring seals are employed. They run the entire circumference of the SRB, and they are bonded to the case using an adhesive. The seal design was originally considered to be redundant, as if the primary first O-ring failed, then the secondary one could also be relied upon. As such, the seal was rated as critical, but a redundant setup. The gaps between the components were then sealed by zinc putty. The O-ring seals are vital in containing the hot gases produced from the SRB's motors during burning. During operation, they will be compressed, sealing the surface, thus stopping any unwanted flames out of the side of the boosters, which could be a little bit catastrophic. But the system design was flawed. Issues were discovered in the early 1970s. This was that the O-ring wouldn't always compress and would instead extrude. NASA thought this was acceptable, but the issues didn't end there. In 1977, a test discovered that the tang and cleavage joint could bend away from each other. This weakened the compression on the O-ring and thus reduced its seal effectiveness. The out-of-spec situation then allowed combustion gases to erode and damage the seal, causing more gases to escape. The issue was further exacerbated when in lower temperatures, as like with everything, different materials expand and contract at different rates. This greatly concerned NASA engineers, and they requested a redesign of the joint to include a shim to close the gap in 1978. 1 year later, and not having received a response to their 1978 memo, a second one was sent, continuing to object to Firecool's solid rocket motor joint seal design. A test in 1980 showed yet again in a tang clevis relative movement was greater than originally predicted. In May 1980, the Verification Certification Committee recommended that NASA conduct full-scale tests to verify the field joint integrity, including firing motors at a mean bulk propellant temperature range of between 40 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. NASA replied, NASA specialists have reviewed the field joint design, updated with larger O-rings and thicker shims, and found the safety factors to be adequate for the current design. Reanalysis of the joint with larger O-rings and thicker shims is being accomplished as part of the lightweight case program. The joint has been sufficiently verified with the testing accomplished to date. The first shuttle mission took place on the 12th of April 1981. All went well, but just on the second mission, STS-2, O-ring erosion was noticed, but was found to be an infrequent problem over the coming years. Erosion was found in March and April 1983, and in February and August of 1984, the latter of which had discovered soot had blown past the primary O-ring. Even though after 1982 the O-ring's designation of redundant was removed, and with evidence of blow-by, shuttle launches still continued. NASA would push the design beyond its temperature limits, when in January 1985 the launch of STS-51C being the coldest space shuttle launch to date. The air temperature was 62 degrees Fahrenheit, or 17 degrees Celsius, and it was estimated that the O-ring temperature was 53 degrees Fahrenheit, or 12 degrees Celsius. Surprise, surprise, both SRBs experienced O-ring erosion and blow-by. Morton Firecoal determined that the low temperature reduced the elasticity of the O-rings, which in turn resulted in the gap not being fully filled, which would then in turn lead to blow-by of soot and gases. Nearly all of the 1985 launches resulted in O-ring deterioration. This prompted Morton Firecoal to redesign the case. However, it was going to take some time, and as such, the original design was to be used till the replacement was available. This would cover the missions that would eventually run into the start of 1986. STS-51L. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about the background of this mission. However, it was quite important in terms of boosting the public's opinion of the shuttle program. The orbiter, Challenger, was mated to her solid rocket boosters and external tank at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida on the 17th of December 1985. The mission had been pushed back to January the 22nd, 1986, after a number of cancellations beginning in July 1985, then due to payload issues in November 85. As such, NASA really wanted to get Challenger into space. She was built and ready to go, and her crew were trained and eager to get on with it. One of the crew of STS-51B was the first participant of the Teacher in Space program, Krista McAuliffe. Again, the mission found itself delayed in January 1986 and was pushed back to the 28th. However, there was an issue. The air temperature was forecast to drop to 18 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 8 degrees Celsius, during the night before the launch date. This would mark a significant drop in lowest temperature the shuttle would ever be launched in. As such, this actually caused some concern with Morton Firecoal's engineering team. Blow-by of the vital O-rings had occurred in warmer temperatures after all. A conference call was set up between NASA and Morton Firecoal engineers. In the call, Morton Firecoal employees, Robert Lund, the Vice President of Engineering, and Joe Kilminster, the Vice President of the Space Booster Programs, advocated against launching until the temperature was above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, or 12 degrees Celsius, aka the lowest the shuttle had previously been launched in. But something about the mood had changed in communications between the Marshall Space Center and Morton Firecoal. Usually it would be a case that Morton Firecoal would have to prove that the SRBs were safe to fly. Understandable in an environment of if in any doubt, don't risk it. However, the Marshall Space Center had moved its position of to prove that the shuttle can't fly, almost as if any doubt was no longer acceptable. Robert Lund would later say, "We had to prove to them that we weren't ready, so we got ourselves in the thought process that we were trying to find some way to prove to them it wouldn't work, and we were unable to do that. We couldn't prove absolutely that the motor wouldn't work." He would also continue to say later on, "Well, that is the kind of mode we got ourselves into that evening. It seems like we have always been in the opposite mode. I should have detected that, but I did not. But the roles had kind of switched." As such, after a 30-minute break in the conference call to confer amongst Morton Firecoal staff, management came to the conclusion that flying in lower temperatures should in theory cause no more issues than when the shuttle flew at a temperature of 53 degrees Fahrenheit. When the conference call resumed, Firecoal came back saying that there was substantial margin in the event of failure, and gave their final approval for flight on the 28th of January. Measurements overnight recorded lows on the left SRB of 25 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 4 degrees Celsius, and the right SRB at 8 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 13 degrees Celsius. Ice had formed all over the fixed service structure. This caused concern with the orbiter's manufacturer, Rockwell International. They were concerned that ice could damage the orbiter's thermal insulation. However, engineers at Kennedy and Johnson Space Centres advised that there was no issues with the ice. However, an hour delay was ordered to allow the temperature to warm up a little bit. The launch was set for just after 11:30 in the morning of the 28th of January. At 20 minutes before liftoff, ice was seen to be melting and clearance for flight was given for 11:38 am. The air temperature now was around 36 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 degrees Celsius. Time for liftoff. 6 seconds before 11:38 am, Challenger's 3 main engines ignited. At T-minus 0 seconds, the 2 solid rocket boosters ignited and Challenger started to move. Almost immediately, a grey puff of smoke was observed around the right booster's joint near the attachment strut. This was hinted at gas blowby due to the improper sealing of the O-rings. Just 2 seconds later, however, the smoke stopped. This was due to some of the solid fuel falling within the booster and temporarily sealing the gap. At 36 seconds post liftoff, Challenger experienced a severe wind shear. To counteract this, the shuttle attempted to correct its trajectory. The change in yaw and pitch dislodged the solid fuel that had been acting as a plug, and this was at an altitude of 3,000 metres or 9,800 feet. At around T 58 seconds, another plume of smoke appeared around the same spots as before, on the right SRB strut. 2 seconds later, the plume begins to touch the external tank. At 64 seconds, a hole could be seen being burned into the tank. This caused a leak of liquid hydrogen fuel. Challenger's computer tried to counter the now lost in thrust from the right SRB. Capcom and the crew aboard the orbiter were still unaware of the unfolding disaster, and at 68 seconds the instruction of throttle up was given. At around 72 seconds, the crew felt a lateral load. Pilot Michael J. Smith was recorded as saying, "Uh-oh." The pressure was falling in the external tank, and thus was affecting the main engine's performance. At 73 seconds, the aft dome of the external tank failed, and at around the same point, the right SRB rotated away from the strut. Moments later, the whole vehicle began to break up. The altitude of Challenger was around now at 47,900 feet. The external tank was now fully disintegrating. Challenger was pushed against the airflow and was hit by aerodynamic forces, resulting in a load factor of up to 20 G. The orbiter separated from the external tank and continued to fly for another 30 or so seconds. The shuttle stack had been completely separated, in sections of the now disintegrated orbiter flying about in different directions, hurtling back towards Earth. The crew compartment remained relatively intact. The force at separation was estimated to be between 12 and 20 G, but quickly dropped down to 4 G and then freefall. It could then be seen falling through the sky. The crew cabin fell for approximately 2 minutes and 45 seconds after its separation, eventually slamming into the Atlantic Ocean. At 89 seconds post-launch, the video of Challenger was seen in mission control, and now the full weight of the disaster began to sink in. NASA Public Affairs Officer Steve Nesbitt would announce the explosion when just a few moments before he had been reading out stats from the flight data. He would say, "We have a report of the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. The flight director confirms that. We're looking at checking with recovery forces to see what can be done at this point." Recovery operations were dispatched immediately with the ships MV Freedom Star and MV Liberty Star heading towards the crash site. However, due to falling debris, recovery couldn't begin until 12:37. Understandably, hopes were held for any survivors, but with an estimated impact force of the crew compartment with the sea being 200 G, it was very unlikely. By 7 PM, some recovered debris from the orbiter and external tank was found. With surface operations concluding on the 7th of February, subsurface operations ending the next day. However, submarines and submersibles would scour the seabed around the impact area for SRB and crew compartment debris for months to come. Pieces of Challenger would continue to wash up ashore, even as late as 2022, when a pretty large piece of around 20 feet long was discovered off the coast of Florida. The crew compartment would be found on the 7th of March 1986. The remains of the crew were removed on the 4th of April, however one of the bodies floated away. This was Gregory Jarvis. His remains were recovered just over a week later. But what the public really needed to know now was how could such a tragedy happen to NASA of all organisations? Finding the cause. Now I'll say straight away, as this video outline has hinted at, that we know what the cause was. It was the poor decision to launch in cold weather that had reduced the effectiveness of the O-ring seal. But in January 1986, that wasn't exactly obvious. After all, blow-by had occurred several times before, and the orbiter had completed many successful missions. The shuttle had over 2.5 million parts, and it was the world's most complex flying machine. The investigation would be no small task. The Presidential Commission on the Space Shuttle Challenger accident was set up in February 1986, and it was tasked with sifting through thousands of documents, photographs and statements. Although the failing O-rings was a big contender, they did have to look at every potential avenue for disaster. The board included Chairman William P. Rogers, Vice Chairman Neil Armstrong, and then David Akerson, Eugene Covert, Richard Feynman, Robert Holtz, Donald Kutcher, Sally Ride, Robert Rummel, Joseph Sutter, Arthur Walker, Abbott Whelan and Chuck Yeager. The investigation would gain the name the Rogers Commission after its chairman. The committee was split into 4 panels: the Accident Analysis Panel, Development and Production Panel, Pre-Launch Activities Panel, and the Mission Planning and Operations Panel. Each panel will contribute to over 160 total interviews over 35 sessions and would involve over 6,000 employees from NASA and its main contractors over a period of 4 months. They would zero in via extensive footage of the launch on the cause of the plume of hot gases that appeared on the right SRB next to the strut. The evidence was pretty damning of an instance of blow-by. On the 11th of February, during a televised hearing, board member Richard Feynman produced a sample of SRB O-ring and placed it in a cold glass of water.
Oh, I took the stuff that I got out of your seal and I put it in ice water. And I discovered that when you put some pressure on it for a while and then undo it, it maintains, it doesn't stretch back, it stays the same dimension. In other words, for a few seconds at least, and more seconds than that, there's no resilience in this particular material when it's at a temperature of 32 degrees.
This memorable moment helped solidify in the public's mind of the poor oversight that NASA had demonstrated. Feynman had been at odds with other members of the commission, including its chair Rogers, due to his harsher approach to investigating the evidence. He was much more critical of NASA management and their apparent lack of understanding of the risks that they had taken, with not only the O-rings but other parts of the shuttle program. NASA's standards had seemingly dropped in order to keep up the busy schedule of orbiter missions, which fostered a management culture of quantity over safety, where blatant red flags were ignored. We can see this in Robert Lund's statements after the disaster. I mentioned earlier that he felt the culture had changed from prove safe to prove it won't be safe. Feynman's criticisms and investigation would appear in the report's Appendix F. His conclusions were pretty harsh. Feynman would say, "If a reasonable launch schedule is to be maintained, engineering often can't be done fast enough to keep up with the expectations of originally conservative certification criteria designed to guarantee a very safe vehicle. In these situations, subtly and often with apparently logical arguments, the criteria are altered so that flights may still be certified in time. They therefore fly in a relatively unsafe condition, with a chance of failure of the order of 1%. It was a clear case, as of what sociologist Diane Vaughan would coin, of normalised deviance, which is the normalisation of clearly unsafe practices, exactly what happened with the first case of O-rings blow-by. Just because it didn't cause a disaster doesn't mean it was safe, but NASA and Morton Firecool carried on regardless. The disaster would result in the redesign of the SRB, where the joint tang would have a reduced risk of rotation. NASA also re-evaluated other parts of the shuttle project, which wouldn't have saved the Challenger's crew, but would overall improve safety of future crews in a multitude of different events. And now for the slightly grim part of when did the crew perish. Although the exact moment isn't known, it's likely some survived post-separation, as some switches had been operated but couldn't have been done so by the impact. The crew were failed that day by a culture of safety ignorance. Of course, space travel can't be 100% safe, but Challenger really shouldn't have flown that day. Feynman, in his conclusion to Appendix F, would rather eloquently say, and I think it best describes the situation, for a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled. Pretty poetic if you ask me. I definitely recommend reading the full Feynman Appendix F section, as he was obviously a genius. So that's it, my video on the Challenger disaster. Although it is a little bit longer than my usual videos, I still feel as if I've barely even scratched the surface. I highly recommend reading the Challenger Launch Decision book by Diane Vaughan. I'll put an Amazon affiliate link in the description, and if you decide to buy it, it helps out the channel with a little kickback. So if you want me to cover the Columbia disaster, let me know in the comments. But I do also fear that it will be quite a larger video. Please feel free to comment, like and subscribe, hit the bell and all that jazz. I'm really trying to push for 1 million subscribers because why the hell not? And all I have to say is thank you for watching, and Mr. Music, play us out please.
In March of 2018, King's Dominion opened its 13th coaster, Twisted Timbers. Rocky Mountain Construction, also known as RMC, had only built 11 machines prior to Timbers. However, those 11 were game changers, flipping the industry upside down in ways never thought possible. The hype was at an all-time high in Virginia, especially considering it had been 8 years since King's Dominion blessed us with I-305. Just down the road at Busch Gardens, things were silent for 2018. The previous year was Invader, a smaller scale GCI. 2 years before that, Tempesto. And 2012 was Verbolten. Fans wanted a new powerhouse in Virginia, and man did they get it. RMC did what they always do, turning arguably the worst coaster in the park into an overall top 25 machine. On opening day for Twisted Timbers, King's Dominion had arguably the strongest top 3 of any park in the world, especially considering that Steel Vengeance over at Cedar Point had yet to open. That argument was short-lived, however, as just a few months later, Volcano the Blast coaster would close. For that entire season, rumors swirled it was close to being repaired. Then all the talk was parts needed to be built and shipped. As time passed, it was looking less and less likely that it would open before the season ended. It didn't. February 8, 2019, the speculation was finally over. King's Dominion had made the decision to remove the Blast coaster. In this industry, these things happen every year. It's just part of the game. And while most ultimately make sense, this one in particular felt like a real punch to the gut. Sure, it had some downtime, but nowhere in the world could you blast out of the top of a volcano. A one-of-a-kind ride experience that took full advantage of that iconic mountain that was King's Dominion. Regardless of that, the park kept true to their word, and in no time, Volcano was gone and that plot of land was leveled. It's been nearly 5 years, and yet still no word on what will replace the beloved Blast Coaster. And that's not the only questions we have for King's Dominion, as everyone continues to talk about Anaconda's future. And what's going on with I-305's long overdue repainting? There are 3 major projects I see coming to the park very soon, all of which I'm going to discuss in this video. Finally, I'll finish things off by showing the 3 coasters that I think could replace Volcano. Rarely do I make a prediction video, however with this being my home park and knowing it inside and out, I really wanted to share my thoughts. This is the uncertain future of King's Dominion. Several years back, I put out a video on Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens, Tampa. In that video, I discussed how it always felt like they were preparing the park for Gwazi versus rushing the project. The competition nearby is strong, and I feel they wanted to win big, repainting so many rides, perfecting new events, and adding tigers beforehand. I get those same vibes when thinking about Volcano's replacement. Think about it, Gwazi closed, and the trains were shipped to Virginia. But the structure stood tall for years before an announcement was made. Now look at Volcano's plot of land. The station was preserved for a reason. Yet it appears the plot of land has not been disturbed since the removal. No cleanup or grass planting like we saw at Kings Island when Vortex was destroyed. And we still have a temporary fence around the area. Trust me, the replacement is coming, which we're going to discuss here in a minute. So considering King's Dominion could be preparing the park to take full advantage of this new addition, let's first look at what's been improved since 2019 and what still needs to be done. First off, the food. It's difficult to put into words the progress King's Dominion's made with the food offerings in just a few short years. This park went from being average at best to playing in the big leagues alongside of parks such as Dollywood and Silver Dollar City. I truly believe this. The decision isn't where to eat, it's how do I choose. Just about every spot has a different specialty, and in my opinion, they're all amazing. The suites are also getting better each year. Not quite at the level of the food, but getting better and better. Similar to how Busch Gardens Tampa added tigers to the park just before building Gwazi, King's Dominion announced the S&S Free Spin, both of which take up a very small footprint and give the park a shiny new toy to look at while also buying a little extra time. At first, many were disappointed. More so, I think, because they knew this meant it'd be longer before that true replacement was coming. What none of us knew was that King's Dominion was planning to retheme this section of the park into one of the strongest in the entire Cedar Fair chain. They cut 0 corners when transforming Safari Village into Jungle Expedition. More great food, shows, theme music, and a focus on attention to detail unlike anything we had seen from Cedar Fair of years past. Avalanche was in desperate need of attention. No problem, Reptilian was born. It looks so much better now, and it fits that new area perfect. They built that 4D free spin and named it Toonbilly. Because of that new theme and attention to detail, it's been a massive hit for the park. Work's also been done to the backlot stunt coaster, helping to bring some of the missing effects back to life. This past off-season, extensive work was done to Grizzly. This coaster's been at the park since '82, and while it's always been a solid ride, it had become almost unbearable in recent years, even after attempts were made to improve it. However, before the '23 season kicked off, King's Dominion hired the Gravity Group to save Grizzly. They'd replace over 1,000 foot of track, steepen the drop an extra 10 degrees, and reprofile certain sections. They knocked it out of the park and launched Grizzly near the top of best attractions at King's Dominion. Riding smoother is an understatement. This is like a whole new addition to the park. Tons of smaller changes I didn't mention, as I wanted to focus on more of the major things Cedar Fair brought to the park. No question, King's Dominion has made huge improvements since that 2019 announcement. So how else can the park improve moving forward, and what else needs to be addressed? Well, for starters, Racer 75 desperately needs a new paint job. Recent work also has this running better than ever, and refreshing that paint would do wonders in this beautiful park. How about Anaconda? That seems to be a talking point every year. Will they remove it? Will it live another year? Well, it's in my opinion that Jungle Expedition ultimately saved the Aero Looper, at least for the foreseeable future. Like we discussed earlier, this new section is themed so well, and Anaconda fits perfect into that area. Then there's I-305. So many questions. Is it technically part of Jungle Expedition along with Flight of Fear? Looking at the theme, no, but the map says different. If not now, how about in the future? Will we see this new theme land and attention to detail expand further? It's rare for Cedar Point to have a star attraction in need of a paint job as bad as I-305. And I got a feeling it's all part of the plan. Intimidator 305 was a great name for this coaster. But then they also named the Hyper in Charlotte Intimidator the same year. I-305 makes sense because of the intensity. Charlotte's Hyper also makes sense, but because of its location near the NASCAR Hall of Fame. But it's always been a bit confusing for many, which is why I personally think that I-305 will soon be getting a new paint job, name, and a new theme that fits into Jungle Expedition better than racing. Either way, keeping it the same or retheming it, we definitely need some new paint and more clarity on its placement in this section of the park along with Flight of Fear. Also expect a new theme for Backlot Stunt Coaster, which would help explain the recent focus on working out some of the issues it previously had. And last, before we talk about what could be replacing Volcano, we gotta talk about that second major project that's gotta be getting close. The tolls and parking lot are in desperate need of attention. The entrance is also really starting to show its age. We know this is important at Cedar Fair, as we've seen major improvements at parks such as Kings Island, Carowinds, and Cedar Point. And the parking lot also needs to be repaved badly, and new markings to help when getting out. If I were a betting person, I'd say this is going to happen very soon, along with a new front entrance, one similar to what we saw at Worlds of Fun. Carowinds and Cedar Point also had this work done, but with the addition of a new coaster. I don't think that's in the cards for King's Dominion, just a new entrance and a rebuilt parking lot. I've spent tons of hours trying to predict what Cedar Fair will build to replace this iconic coaster. Looking into who Cedar Fair has been working with and what's at Busch Gardens Williamsburg are the main driving factors here. You can forget the B&M invert and dive machine, as Busch Gardens Williamsburg an hour away. It also seemed likely the B&M Hyper is off the table as well, with Apollo's Chariot still running strong in Williamsburg. However, I'm still not entirely sold on this idea, as these coasters are so well rounded and would give King's Dominion that much needed floater air. RMC, I'd imagine, is also off the table with the addition of Timbers, and you already have a 300-foot machine next door, so that's not happening. An Intamin would also be amazing, but that's one of those I need to see it before I believe it situations, as I-305 was the last time Cedar Fair worked with Intamin. The park already has 3 wood coasters, so I think that option's out, though not impossible after seeing the overall positive response from Mystic Timbers over at Kings Island. Not my 3 dream coasters, but what I think is most likely. Cedar Fair just announced a new Vekoma at Kings Island for the 2024 season, and this could possibly be the test for working with them in the future. Vekoma has really turned the corner and is building some elite machines. One of these would fit very nicely on Volcano's plot of land. Just look at what Vekoma did with Guardians of the Galaxy at Epcot and Big Bear Mountain at Dollywood, both of which are very exciting rides the entire family could enjoy. Which is something I think King's Dominion is missing, even though they have a lot of coasters that have a 48-inch height requirement or lower. Next up is the B&M Wing Coaster. This was rumored to be the replacement early on, but it seemed to lose traction. Though I do wonder if this was due to the park possibly stepping back on that replacement and instead working on the park and adding Toon Billy. While not my first choice, this would be a win for King's Dominion. There are none around, and the closest is located in Dollywood. Plus, we know Cedar Fair loves to work with B&M. Not to mention, they're very dependable and have great capacity. You could even pay homage to Volcano by launching it, as we've seen with Thunderbird at Holiday World. But for me, the Grand Slam is an extreme spinning coaster by Mach Rides. There's only one in America, and it's located all the way at Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri. Cedar Fair recently worked with Mach Rides on Copperhead Strike at Carowinds, and that ride's been a huge hit. This would be massive for King's Dominion, especially with all the theming possibilities right in Jungle X. It would be unlike anything around. Time Traveler is such an enjoyable and comfortable ride. I can't help but to smile every time I'm on it. Yes, it's a big investment, but one I think the park's prepared to make. With the recent news of Dorney Park adding a B&M dive machine, I think it's safe to say that Cedar Fair is not scared of making a big investment. So let's say I happen to predict the future of King's Dominion perfectly. When and how long could I see all this coming together? Well, 3 stages over the course of 3 years. Since we got no major announcement yet for the 24 season, I could easily see I-305 getting a new theme and paint this off-season, and possibly new paint for Racer. The following year, I could see them rebuilding the parking lot, tolls, and front entrance. And finally in 2016, that volcano replacement finally becoming a reality. But who knows what's really in store for King's Dominion? I guess I'll have to come back and check how I did in 2026. Until then, huge shout out to King's Dominion and Cedar Fair for the great direction this park's been headed in recent years. It's the one park I never seem to have a bad visit at. Love to see it.
Over the years, the amusement industry has built some truly unbelievable roller coasters. What's more, the sheer insanity of these attractions is only matched by the stories and tall tales that get told about them. Sometimes these rumors end up being true, but what happens when these stories take a detour into absurdity? You get some of the most outrageous roller coaster rumors ever conceived. So as voted on by the viewers, here are just some of the craziest roller coaster rumors of all time. Number 10. The launch lift hill on Wicker Man at England's Alton Towers. First opening in 2018, Wicker Man was the first wooden roller coaster to come to the UK in 22 years. Built by American manufacturer Great Coasters International, this airtime-packed coaster was the first to combine wood and fire via a series of special effects. Speaking of which, during the ride's development, the online rumor mill was fired up with some pretty spicy theories. You see, Alton Towers can't build past the tree line, all at the request of local residents who don't wish to see or hear the park from their houses. At one point, online enthusiasts took note of a proposed silent magnetic lift system that was in the ride's original plans. Even more noteworthy was the shape of the lift hill. Based on the plans, the lift hill seemed to stop partway up, containing a straight section of track. Many assumed this was where the holding brake would be, with an LSM launch system following immediately afterwards. If true, this would have made it the second launched wooden roller coaster after Dollywood's recently opened Lightning Rod. Unfortunately for launchaholics though, there would be no such system on this coaster. In reality, the brake run was positioned near the start of the lift hill, but the lift hill had a height limit it couldn't exceed. So the lift changes angles in the middle to allow it to clear over the brake run while also keeping the ride within the park's height restriction. So no silent launch, just some good old-fashioned roller coaster tycoon ingenuity. What's especially hilarious is that the system they went with is anything but silent. The lift hill, with its standard anti-rollback system, is about as quiet as an Iron Maiden concert, or so I've been told. It's unknown what happened to the proposed silent lift hill technology, but even if a launch was planned at some point, it's easy to see the technical nightmares of Lightning Rod putting the kibosh on these plans. Number 9. The drop track on Mystic Timbers at Ohio's Kings Island. First opening in 2017, Mystic Timbers is an excellent wooden roller coaster at Kings Island. Like Wicker Man, it is also constructed by Great Coasters International, so that's 2 GCIs in a row here. Shortly after the ride's announcement, the park teased a mysterious shed at the end of the coaster. They even coined the hashtag, "What's in the shed?" Speculation ran rampant, and eager coaster enthusiasts took this speculation to the next level. Perhaps the most common thing that was rumored by fans was a drop track. This element brings riders to a horizontal section of track which allows a full train of passengers to drop vertically. This is done with a mechanism that drops the segment of track with the train and guests on board. This theory, however, had a big problem. Based on the rendering of the shed that was released, there was no way it would be possible. The drop track mechanism is fairly large and it requires a lot of space, but the shed is built on a wooden support structure that you can see through. So unless the train could magically no-clip through the wooden structure, this was not possible. When the ride finally opened, the shed was revealed to be a heavily themed brake run. Inside are props and lighting effects, along with a projection screen showing one of 3 monsters attacking the train. While this was a cool way to make waiting to enter the station more interesting, some of the more ornery enthusiasts vented their frustration at the lack of a drop track. Alas, not even in Ohio can you no-clip through a wooden structure. It's also worth noting that some of the other things that were rumored were an inversion and a backwards launch, which is honestly hysterical. Number 8. Vekoma damaged Aero development. What can I say about Aero that hasn't already been said? They were the true pioneer of coaster innovation and gave the industry some truly groundbreaking rides. They gave us the first ever steel tubular coaster with Matterhorn and created the corkscrew model, the world's first successful looping steel coaster. Back in the 70s, Aero was constantly evolving, and they were interested in selling their coasters internationally. To make manufacturing more efficient and cost-effective, they found a partner across the ocean in the form of Dutch manufacturer Vekoma. Vekoma initially handled the steel supports for Aero's European coasters, but they later branched out and started manufacturing coasters on their own. Vekoma made a licensing deal with Aero to construct their style of coasters in Europe, and this is where many mistakenly assume Aero was done wrong. In the documentary, The Legacy of Aero Development, Vekoma's relationship with Arrow was portrayed negatively. The documentary states, quote, "The plan backfired, and Vekoma began building their own trains and manufacturing a variant of Arrow's track design for themselves. Arrow's once revered skill and trade secrets were all but gone." This documentary fueled the belief that Vekoma swiped Arrow's track design from under the table. Even today, many blame Vekoma for Arrow initially going bankrupt in the 1980s. However, there's a couple of details that are often overlooked. First, Arrow's bankruptcy was not due to Vekoma taking their business. In actuality, it was a result of their costly involvement in the 1984 World's Fair, coupled with their ambitious expansion and taking on more projects than they could afford to build at the time. Secondly, when Vekoma started building their own coasters, they didn't cut ties with Arrow entirely. In fact, they continued to purchase trains from Arrow, so Vekoma actually helped Arrow out during their financial struggles. Let's make it clear, Vekoma obtained the license to build coasters in Arrow's style fair and square. Number 7. The washing machine element on the Smiler at Alton Towers. First opening in 2013, this attraction took and still holds the record for the most upside-down moments on any roller coaster. During its development phase, this record was guessed pretty early on by park fans. At the time though, the original plans for the ride hinted at a mere 8 inversions. This set the stage for some serious speculation. Park fans undoubtedly pondered how on earth the ride would claim the inversion record with just 8 of them. After all, Colossus at England's Thorpe Park had 10, and that had been in operation since 2002. Well, park fans had a rather interesting theory that would allow this record to be broken without changing the plans. Introducing the washing machine element. This rotating tunnel was a popular rumor on fan site Towers Times, and was even given a full fan rendering by website officials. The theoretical element went like this. The train would enter the tunnel, where it would be spun in a barrel roll 4 times. It would then complete the rest of the ride, resulting in a 12 inversion coaster. Can we just take a moment to appreciate the boldness of such a concept? And aside from that, can you imagine the maintenance nightmare a rotating tunnel like this would be? Not to mention what would happen if riders got stuck upside down. Talk about a major bar for Rama. As unbelievable as this seems in hindsight, the original plans made this a real possibility for many. On the contrary, Alton Towers was actually playing a clever ruse. The fact was that the park had always planned for the Smiler to feature 14 inversions, but they decided to keep 6 of them hidden from the initial plans in order to avoid letting the cat out of the bag too early. What park fans ended up getting was an impressive record breaker that was perfectly engineered for extreme thrill seekers. Still though, the rotating tunnel concept was a fascinating idea, and don't be surprised if you see it in your dreams or your nightmares tonight. Number 6. Top Thrill 2's 500-foot spike at Ohio's Cedar Point. One of the most talked about recent coaster developments is the reimagining of Top Thrill Dragster, soon to be reborn as Top Thrill 2. Over the years, this coaster faced countless technical difficulties. Even former Cedar Fair CEO Dick Kinzel called this ride his dumbest decision. However, despite its problems, the ride has still maintained a die-hard fanbase over the years. As a result, Cedar Point wasn't ready to tear down this iconic coaster. Instead, they decided to give it a new lease on life. In 2024, this coaster will open with a more reliable magnetic launch, bidding farewell to the old problematic hydraulic system. Since magnetic launches are less powerful than hydraulic ones though, this ride will use a swing launch system, so there won't just be one launch. The first launch will now take the train only part way up the 420-foot top hat. After rolling backwards, a switch track system will send it into a reverse spike of track. Guests will go backwards up the spike in order to gain enough momentum to complete the final launch. The final launch will take guests to the original top speed of 120 miles per hour, allowing the vehicle to complete the top hat. This reimagining seems simple, and simulation made it out to be completely psychotic. Some let their imaginations run wild, with ambitious theories that may cause you to do a spit take. One bizarre assumption was that Top Thrill Dragster would reclaim the record for the world's tallest coaster. Many predicted the reverse spike early on, but some thought the spike was going to be 500 feet for the sole purpose of reclaiming the tallest coaster record from King to Ka. From the beginning, it was pretty clear why the spike wouldn't be 500 feet though. The top hat element is 420 feet. A 500-foot spike simply wouldn't be necessary to provide the train with enough momentum to climb up the other end. In fact, it might make the train go way too fast unless there were brakes before the top hat, which would be a hell of a buzzkill. And let's be real here, do we really expect Cedar Point to invest in a 500-foot spike they don't need? Manufacturing track costs a ton of money. Why spend it on track that will never be needed? Although enthusiasts certainly have good imaginations, sometimes reality brings us back down to earth. Fortunately, with Top Thrill 2 on the horizon, we will soon find out just how insane this ride really is. Number 5. Magnum XL 200 sinking into the sand at Cedar Point. Here's yet another Cedar Point rumor, this time involving the revolutionary Magnum XL 200. This ride was the first full-circuit roller coaster to exceed the 200-foot height threshold. Adding to its allure, this remarkable coaster was beautifully positioned on Cedar Point's picturesque peninsula, offering riders a breathtaking vista of Lake Erie. It's not every day that you can ride a major coaster that's on the beach. Shortly after its opening, an utterly laughable rumor began circulating about its location. This rumor claimed that Magnum XL 200 was gradually sinking into the very sand it was built upon. Just imagine coming back after the off-season to find the coaster halfway underground. Reportedly, this rumor originated in a local newspaper as an April Fool's prank. But as the internet rose to prominence, it grew into something many coaster fans actually believed. This rumor gained so much traction that Cedar Point officials had to step in and set the record straight on their official website. In their own words, contrary to popular belief, the Magnum XL 200 is not sinking and it is not being sold. Rest assured, Magnum XL 200 stands tall to this day, and there are no Sarlacc pits in Ohio that I'm aware of, so it isn't likely to sink into the sand anytime soon. Number 4. RMC Son of Beast at Kings Island. Admittedly, this one is partially my own fault. Yes, I helped spread this rumor. One of the most infamous roller coaster histories is that of Son of Beast at Kings Island. This ride opened as the tallest and fastest wooden coaster in the world, with an impressive vertical loop in its layout. However, this coaster was anything but successful. Construction issues, safety concerns, and maintenance woes forced Son of Beast to close in 2009, with the ride being torn down in 2012. It was certainly one of the biggest flops in roller coaster history. Shortly after its closure, American manufacturer Rocky Mountain Construction burst onto the scene with new Texas Giant. This reimagining of the old wooden coaster Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas involved giving the ride a new steel track and more intense elements. Many have speculated that if Son of Beast didn't close, it would have made for a great RMC reimagining. Some have even speculated what an RMC Son of Beast could have looked like, and this is where things get a bit embarrassing. In 2018, enthusiasts noticed a teaser poster that seemed to hint at a new addition for Kings Island. I myself noticed this poster and made a video on it pointing out a few things. First, there was the mention of Outpost 5, which was the name of Son of Beast Station. Then there was the reference to Southern Yellow Pine, which was the exact wood used for Son of Beast. My video ended up getting a lot of traction with Kings Island fans, and even WKYC News in Cincinnati featured it in a story. But as it turned out, I was barking up the wrong tree. These references were simply Easter eggs, and were not at all intended to tease a reimagined Son of Beast. When you really think about it, why on earth would Kings Island reimagine a coaster that was a total failure for them? Well, some pointed this out at the time, but I still believed it was possible for some reason. Shortly after my video, Kings Island did announce a revival at their park. What's more, the park teased, quote, "something old will be new again," but it was of their antique cars ride. And just to add a cherry on top of this Sunday, I had the opportunity to speak with none other than RMC designer Alan Schilke that year. When I asked him about the RMC Son of Beast rumor, his response was, and I quote, "I'm glad that rumor wasn't true. But hey, at least I made the news." Number 3. Cedar Point's 500-foot T-Rex. This rumor was also partially fueled by me, though it was also fueled by RMC themselves. Now let me start by saying that Cedar Point has broken boundaries several times in its history. After all, it was the first park to have full-circuit coasters reach 200, 300, and 400 feet. So naturally, many Cedar Point fans have been eager to see the park build a 500-foot tall coaster. In 2018, this speculation caught on. At the same IAAPA Expo where I got to speak to Alan Schilke, I interviewed design engineer Colin Kuhn of Rocky Mountain Construction. I asked him about the company's upcoming first park to have full-circuit coasters reach 200, 300, and 400 feet. So naturally, many Cedar Point fans have been eager to see the park build a 500-foot-tall coaster. In 2018, this speculation caught on. At the same IAAPA Expo where I got to speak to Alan Schilke, I interviewed design engineer Colin Kuhn of Rocky Mountain Construction. I asked him about the company's upcoming projects, but at one point, I got into the subject of the T-Rex coaster, which was revealed years earlier. This large single-rail coaster was once heavily promoted by the company as their next major innovation. During my interview, Kuhn said the following about the T-Rex model.
Bigger track, obviously, and bigger trains. We're hoping to go, we can probably go 400 or 500 foot with that if we wanted to.
I was visibly shook by this remark, and it started a firestorm of speculation in the comments. From there, coaster fanatics started suggesting that Cedar Point would be the perfect place to build such a coaster. One user even created a fan rendering of what such a ride would look like. Since then, the rumor has snowballed, with many fans actually expecting this coaster to come to the park at some point. While unfortunately this isn't likely to happen anytime soon. According to a later interview I did with RMC, the company is mainly focused on the Raptor model. The cost of research and development would be astronomical with the T-Rex, and it's not as practical as the Raptor is. The Raptor has simply proven to be more appealing to potential buyers, which is why we've seen so many of them open as of late. From a park's perspective, why spend tens of millions on a 500-foot prototype with a massive steel track when you can still attract tons of guests with a Raptor? This isn't to say the T-Rex will never be built, but the 500-foot tall variant at Cedar Point is probably going to be a pipe dream. Number 2. Jodie Sweetin's death on Batman the Ride at Illinois' Six Flags Great America. Now this one is just hilarious. This bizarre rumor involves an actress from Full House and one of the most iconic roller coasters in history, Batman the Ride. As many enthusiasts already know, Batman the Ride was the first ever inverted coaster by Swiss manufacturer Bolliger & Mabillard. At the time, it was a one-of-a-kind experience, with floorless seats that hung from the track. Not too long after its opening though, things got weird. Around that time, a woman from Wisconsin sent in a rather peculiar question to a Q&A column. She wanted to know if Jodie Sweetin, the actress known for her role as Stephanie Tanner on Full House, had bit the dust on Batman the Ride. And the source of this rumor? A few of her daughter's classmates had claimed that Sweetin had died on the coaster. Well, you have to keep in mind that the internet was still in its infancy, and you couldn't simply pull up the news on your Google app. As a result, the columnist had to be the voice of reason. They confirmed the rumor was entirely false. Moreover, they suggested that the girl spreading the story might have been motivated by jealousy towards Sweetin. But the best part of the story is what Sweetin herself had to say about it. In an interview with the Chicago Reader, she said the following about this rumor. "Who makes up this shit? It had to originate somewhere. It's so funny to me." So there you have it. Batman the Ride is safe, and Sweetin is still alive to this day. And hey, at least we got a funny story out of this. Number 1. The nets under roller coaster track are meant to catch the trains if they fall. This rumor takes the cake for sheer absurdity, and the worst part is, I heard it firsthand. So this happened at Six Flags America. It was here, right before I embarked on the infamous Mind Eraser, or as I like to call it, the worst coaster I've ever ridden, that I overheard a conversation that left me utterly flabbergasted. Near the entrance, there's a net strategically placed beneath the final brake run. Now you might think this net serves a straightforward purpose, to catch any loose objects that might accidentally fall from passengers, and you'd be absolutely right. But what I overheard next defied all logic. A fellow guest, apparently a master of roller coaster conspiracy theories, turned to her friend and confidently stated that the net was there to catch the entire roller coaster train if it were to somehow fall from the track. Now, forgive me, but let's take a moment to debunk this malarkey. Roller coaster trains are massive, weighing thousands of pounds. The idea that a net, situated at the end of the ride mind you, could catch an entire train hurtling through the air is nothing short of ridiculous. And consider this. Why on earth would anyone conceive the notion that roller coaster trains might just spontaneously fly off the track? I mean, sure, coasters can be intense, but they're engineered with precision to keep us, safe. Now to be fair, not everyone knows the specifics of how roller coasters work. I'm not going to sit here and declare myself the all-knowing emperor of coaster knowledge either. But the guest was an adult, not a 5-year-old child, so I would think that common sense would apply in this case. But alas, none was to be found in that moment of time. but on the bright side, it did make for a good laugh. Now it's time for the comment shoutout program. This is where I take 5 random comments from my previous video and read them out. These comments are from my top 10 most intense roller coasters video. Lightning Boat says, Steel Vengeance isn't overly extreme in my opinion, but it is forceful and whippy and is my personal number 1. Megan Jones says, Iron Gwazi literally left me speechless. It's such an amazing ride, absolutely a must ride. Northern Ride says, Boost mode on Tornado honestly felt so intense, I question how the wheels on the car could even take the force. I'm certain it's unofficially the most forceful coaster in the world in boost mode. From the way it feels, it has to be at least 7 Gs. Kona Bro Gaming says, I-305 is quite easily one of the most intense coasters I've been on, and I've ridden El Toro and King Ka. That first drop is ridiculous. And Mega Edge says, I gotta give an honorable mention to Tatsu's gigantic pretzel loop. One of, if not the most, intense feeling I've ever had on a ride. If you want to see your words in my next video, leave a comment down below and it may be selected. Please note though that inflammatory or spam comments will not be read. Thank you all so much, and if you want to support me on Patreon, you can do so once again at the link in the description. Thanks for watching everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com. And I'm on TikTok. This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time. Epilepsy warning for flashing lights and colors. You've heard of successful roller coaster makeovers, but what about the makeovers that went wrong? These are when parks attempt to make a ride better, but end up making it worse. There are so many instances of this happening to roller coasters that I decided to make a video about it. So as voted on by the fans, here are the top 10 worst roller coaster makeovers. Number 10, the stand-up trains on Extreme Roller at Missouri's Worlds of Fun. Just this year, we saw the rebirth of the stand-up coaster at SeaWorld Orlando, but the concept got its start all the way back in 1983. That year, Worlds of Fun officials partnered with American manufacturer Aero Host to add some new flair to one of the latter company's coasters. What they did was take their looping coaster Scream Roller and add prototype stand-up trains to it. Unfortunately, as is often the case with prototype designs, being the first of its kind was certainly problematic. As it turned out, the old ride's lift hill was unable to handle the heavier stand-up trains. Another issue with the trains was their center of gravity. Because it was vastly different from the old trains, it caused additional stress on the lift. The mechanical issues were so bad that the stand-up trains were removed after just one season. Aero also attempted to put stand-up trains on what's now River King Mine Train at Six Flags St. Louis. After a tragic incident involving a passenger falling out of the vehicle, though, those trains were also retired. Arrow then discontinued the stand-up trains, and they remain a brief but notable footnote in the company's history. Number 9. The Kumbach trains on T3 at Kentucky Kingdom, and Arkham Asylum Shock Therapy at Australia's Warner Bros. Movie World. Dutch manufacturer Kumbach has been a source of controversy among coaster enthusiasts. The company specializes in upgrading rides in a variety of ways, such as installing new braking and control systems. The company has also dipped their toes into ride vehicle design to mixed results. While their designs appear smooth and sleek at first glance, many have criticized them for providing uncomfortable ride experiences. This is especially the case for their inverted roller coaster trains. Kumbach has installed these trains on 2 now-defunct coasters, Arkham Asylum Shock Therapy and T3. Both of these coasters are suspended looping coaster models by fellow Dutch manufacturer Vekoma. This model is often criticized for rough, headbanging ride experiences. As such, the design of Kumbach's restraints is meant to prevent headbanging. There are no hard shoulder restraints right next to passengers' heads. However, these trains presented a different problem entirely. The lap bar, which went over passengers' thighs, was widely hated for being way too tight. Passengers of all different statures have labeled the restraint as a thigh crusher from the way it pressed down on people's legs. Even worse, the trains were rumored to cause significant wear on the track, which many have suggested led to the closures of both coasters they were installed on. However, it's worth noting that there is no official word on why these coasters closed. Either way though, even if the trains didn't damage the track, they were still hated by pretty much everyone. Even Kentucky Kingdom themselves regularly roasted the ride on their social media pages. You know you have a problem when even the park is telling you that a ride is bad. Number 8. Rotational Motions trains on Cliffhanger at North Carolina's Ghost Town in the Sky. Say what you want about the Kumbach trains, but at least they lasted a few years before their rides closed. With Cliffhanger's trains though, it was an even bigger disaster. First opening in 1988 as Red Devil, this coaster operated on the side of a mountain in North Carolina's Maggie Valley. Built by American manufacturer Hopkins Rides, this coaster operated all the way until the park's initial closure in 2002. Later on in 2007, officials planned to reopen the park. They also planned to reopen the coaster under the new name Cliffhanger. For the occasion, new trains were purchased from Tennessee-based manufacturer Rotational Motion. For those of you who have never heard of this company, neither have I. Despite the plans, the roller coaster wouldn't open in 2007 due to technical issues. It wouldn't be until 2009 that the ride opened with the new trains, but not so fast, because just 2 days after it reopened, the ride was shut down by inspectors. It turned out that a hairline crack was discovered in one of the train's frames, putting guests in serious danger. Though it did reopen in October that year, it was shut down again due to more unspecified technical issues. The park had reportedly considered buying a new train, but in 2009, officials had filed for bankruptcy. This was after spending $11 million on park improvements, and over half of which went towards the roller coaster. So yes, the park bought new trains that cracked after 2 days of operation and went bankrupt in the process. Nowadays, the park sits abandoned, with the disastrous trains still on the property. But honestly, these things deserve to be on display in the Museum of Failure. Number 7. The magnetic brakes on Wild Mouse at England's Blackpool Pleasure Beach. This coaster had a reputation as a rough and relentless ride experience, and it was also one of the most cherished roller coasters in Blackpool's history. First opening in 1958, this was one of only a few wooden Wild Mouse coasters that was still operating in the 2010s. Its intense laterals, thrilling dips, and near-miss moments with the structure made it a cult classic among coaster enthusiasts. On top of that, there were no restraints, with only a seatbelt holding riders in. This gave it an extra sense of danger that enthusiasts ate up like they were at a food truck festival. Around 2016, it was decided to modernize the coaster for better future operations. To do this, park officials eliminated the manual skid brake system and replaced it with a magnetic braking system in 2017. However, these brakes didn't work well with the coaster, and they caused an excess of downtime and unspecified technical issues. After just one season with the new braking system, the unthinkable happened. The coaster was suddenly demolished without any fanfare in 2018, which highly enraged the ride's fan base. It's unknown if the braking system played a role in its closure. and there were already rumors that UK health and safety officials were looking to shut the ride down. Regardless, the braking system was an undeniable technical headache, and the fact that it failed to extend the coaster's life is especially worth noting. Number 6. The new trains and retracking on Wildcat at Connecticut's Lake Compounce. First opening in 1927, this is one of the oldest American roller coasters still standing. Naturally, as wooden coasters get older, they need regular maintenance and upkeep. After almost a century of operation, the coaster had gotten pretty rough by the mid-2010s and was in desperate need of upgrades. So after the 2016 season, park officials brought in Canadian coaster company Martin & Vleemanx to install a new control system. They also reconstructed the lift hill and completely retracked the layout. Not only that, but the park had contacted American manufacturer Great Coasters International to install Millennium Flyer trains on it. These are the same trains that are used on such acclaimed coasters as Mystic Timbers and Ghost Rider, so many enthusiasts were excited for the makeover. After a few delays, the ride eventually reopened to critical acclaim. Actually no, it opened to extremely negative reviews. I personally grew up with this coaster, and even I couldn't deny how painful it became. It's unknown whether there were miscommunications in the retracking process or an issue with the trains being incompatible with the layout. Either way though, when I rode this coaster 2 years ago, I was legitimately concerned that I had injured my lower back. This coaster became unbearably bouncy, jackhammering you into the seat relentlessly throughout the layout. After a couple of years of negative reviews, the park recently made the decision to retrack the coaster yet again. Doing this will require the ride's closure for the entire 2023 season. Hopefully when it reopens, I won't be concerned about spending the rest of my life as a hunchback after riding it. Number 5. The retheming of Rock 'n' Roller Coaster to Avengers Assemble Flight Force at France's Walt Disney Studios Park. Disney has a mixed record of implementing intellectual properties into their parks in recent years. Some attractions, like Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind and Tron Light Cycle Power Run, are highly acclaimed. But for every success, there's a failure. In 2022, Disneyland Paris opened their new Avengers Campus area. This area was heavily criticized for being bland and uninspiring, looking more like an industrial shopping center than an exciting comic book themed land. Perhaps the most lambasted attraction to open was Avengers Assemble Flight Force. This ride was formerly known as Rock 'n' Roller Coaster, a clone of the famous ride at Disney's Hollywood Studios in Florida. What Disney did was remove the Aerosmith theme and replace it with one based on the Avengers. Despite the initial hype though, this attraction was met with a swift backlash from both coaster enthusiasts and Marvel fans. Pretty much the only thing that was praised about this attraction was the Iron Man animatronic in the queue. Aside from that, the new theming on the coaster was cheap and hastily tacked on. Sure, there are a few small screens here and there, but most of the coaster takes place in complete darkness with hardly any theming or special effects. Many have also said that the storyline is hard to follow as well, and that the whole ride experience is a complete waste of time. The ride was clearly under budgeted, and there are already rumors of it being refurbished again in the future. For now though, it remains one of the biggest butcherings of a Disney ride. And speaking of which, number 4, both rethemes of Space Mountain from the Earth to the Moon at France's Disneyland Paris. This is yet another coaster that's part of the Disneyland Paris resort. Originally, this coaster opened in 1995 as Space Mountain from the Earth to the Moon. The original theme was inspired by the works of Jules Verne, with a steampunk-style aesthetic, elaborate special effects, and onboard audio. This theme was highly acclaimed, and it's considered to be one of the best indoor roller coasters ever. Unfortunately, about a decade later, the coaster was given its first makeover, being retooled as Space Mountain Mission 2. This was done to boost park attendance by marketing it as a new attraction while keeping the coaster as a whole the same. Basically, they switched its Jules Verne theme to a generic sci-fi one. This change was heavily looked down upon by the ride's fans, but this backlash was nothing compared to the next makeover. In 2017, the ride was rethemed yet again to Star Wars Hyperspace Mountain Rebel Mission. The all-new experience was themed to the Star Wars franchise, and to say park fans were pissed off would be a complete understatement. The retheme was heavily criticized for being bland and uninspired. Many park fans felt that the Star Wars theme sucked the color and originality out of the ride, only to replace it with a plastered-on IP. Many view it as soulless compared to the old Jules Verne theme. Still though, the new ride does have its fans. In fact, I remember when I got into a bit of hilarious hot water with the fine folks over at Memulus for my previous assessment of it. Though its initial Jules Verne-inspired theme would eventually be replaced by a less impressive Star Wars theme.
Excuse me?
You've just opened a can
Oh,
of worms.
mate.
Theme park crazy, you've just opened a can of worms.
mate.
You're gonna regret saying that.
Turn it off, turn it off.
Of course, this is all in good fun, but still, if you're a fan of this ride, feel free to comment down below. Number 3, the structural adjustments and the new trains on Son of Beasts at Ohio's Kings Island. Ah yes, perhaps the most talked about defunct roller coaster in the enthusiast community. The good old abomination by the Roller Coaster Corporation of America has become internationally known for its dismal failure. First opening in 2000, this coaster was the tallest and fastest wooden coaster on Earth. It was also the first wooden coaster to feature an inversion since the experimental days of the early 1900s. Sadly, what started off as a unique, record-breaking wooden coaster would end up being a major headache for everyone involved. And that was in addition to the literal headaches it caused with its jackhammeringly rough ride experience that was hard to read. The structure was poorly designed, and the layout consisted mostly of large milquetoast helixes. Interestingly enough, the only part of the ride that was said to be good was the loop. This was due to it being made out of steel instead of wood, and being a hell of a lot smoother as a result. But one good inversion doesn't make a good ride. Ever since it opened, this coaster faced a number of maintenance issues. Perhaps the biggest issue with the ride was how wobbly the structure was. To fix this, officials made modifications to the ride to stiffen the structure and decrease its movement. But making the structure stiffer made it harder to absorb the stress that the trains put on it. This led to an incident in 2006 where a wooden beam snapped, causing the track above to sag. This formed a pothole on said track, and when a train full of riders passed over it, everyone on board received a jolt that was so violent, they were all sent to the hospital. After the incident, the park decided to install lighter trains to lessen the stress on the structure. However, these new trains came with a major downside. Because they were lighter, they didn't have the momentum necessary to complete the loop. Because of this, Kings Island was forced to remove the best part of the ride. Without the loop, this was nothing more than a dull wooden coaster. Sure, it was still tall and fast, but what was the point of having records when the ride experience was total crap? After another incident where a woman claimed to suffer a brain injury, as well as further inspections, the park decided this coaster was not worth having around. So the ride was torn down in 2012, and later partially replaced by the inverted coaster Banshee. Number 2, the new train